Hello, everyone. Well, 2 videos in one day? 2? That's crazy. Well, it's not so crazy. There's something I wanted to talk about. Actually, I want to talk about, which is I want to talk about some visual effects stuff, actually, which we have been talking about doing, but haven't done yet. And normally, our friends in Europe drafted because it's like middle of the night usually when we're doing a stream. So I thought, you know what, I'll do a late night one just to see if some of the other continent people get a chance to catch what we're doing. But I want to talk about some visual effects work. As you know, I do work in visual effects, and sort of as a, I don't know, just an epilogue, I guess, on our last transmission today. The thing about working in, which is really, really cool, is it teaches you to see the world differently. It makes you a lot more present as you walk through the world, a lot more observant. Because ultimately, if you do the kind of work that I do, which is like photoreal visual effects work, in order to recreate the world, you have to know exactly what it looks like for real and how people view it and perceive it. And the truth is that people perceive the world very, very differently than they think they do. There's basically 2 levels at which people see the world. They see it conscious, and then there's all the stuff that their brain sees that their eyes don't. Just procedurally, you know, when you walk down the street and you're walking down the street, a car, and here comes a car, and there's a lady walking her dog, that's what your brain sees. Of course, in the background, trees are blowing and a bird flew by and maybe somebody moved past their window. Actually, in truth, 1,000 other things were going on in the background there, which you didn't notice because you're focused on the car that might or might not hit you and the person with the dog. But the truth is that your brain sees all of it. It all comes in, and it makes a decision in terms of which information it needs to feed your conscious mind, because you can't deal with all of it. It would be if your brain had to consciously present you on all the trees moving and all the shadows that played and all the people and all this, the assault on your senses of simply walking outside would be overwhelming. It would be more than you could handle. Although this is exactly the way a baby begins, by perceiving the world. Part of why they sleep so much and why they cry, because they can't make differentiations yet between depth. They don't recognize face, car, animal, cup. Those things anything yet. It's just this assault of shapes, and you know, their brain has to work out what the world looks like. You know, we take that for granted. But you don't when you work in visual effects. And so one of the things when you're doing photoreal work is figuring out, okay, of all of the things that are going on in the world, which are the ones that are most important in order for people to believe that this fake thing that I'm generating is real. Let me know. All stream seems like it's freaking out because, oh yeah, I still got sound glitches. Let me know, because this computer is working real. It's running like 3 programs at one time right now. It's just a little laptop. Just let me know. I'm going to try something, though, while we're doing that. Anyway, so the point is that we have to figure out, we have to make choices about what we're showing to people and what we're not. Because the world is so complicated that we can't actually replicate every single thing that nature does. When we're making an image or if we're doing a shot, nature's too complicated. There's too much going on. I mean, it would take us years and years and years to do it if we were even attempting to do that. Just to model all the things in the frame or do whatever's all in the frame, that would take forever. And if we don't get it exactly right, it can end up being really, really distracting. So we have to make very clear choices, and we have to gain an understanding of how people see the world. And since we're part of the world, we're taking most of the world for granted too. And so it's a really interesting process. Of learning to see the world. Let me just see. I'm seeing all kinds of comments here. Sound glitches, random beeps. Let me know. Let me know if it gets any better as we, because I don't want to go into the presentation part of this we've worked out our technical stuff. Because this actually really is interesting. And it's actually my favorite thing about visual effects is that it totally changed the way I saw the world. And I can just tell you that for me, just the experience of going outside any time in my life now, just looking at the world, being around the world is really interesting and infinitely more interesting than it was before I knew to be present and aware. And I'm also a lot more present just walking around. It's also a really interesting insight into the finely tuned bullshit detector that human beings have in their brains, which are informed by a lifetime of experience. How are we doing? How's our audio? It was an accidental career. I mean, I don't know if you've ever heard that story. I didn't mean to have a career in visual effects. It was a hobby that became a second career by accident. But good morning from Germany. Good. I'm saying this is what I was hoping for. I don't care if there's only 10, 12, 20. I don't care. Just so long as some of you European guys who get shafted normally during the live stuff get an opportunity to see a live stream. How are we doing on audio? How's that sounding? Is it coming better? So anyway, like I said, when you go and you have to recreate the world, remember in the computer, it's not buttons. You have to know everything about what material surfaces look like, how light interacts and shadow interacts. And the world is an insanely complicated place. Now, when I started in visual effects, we had to do every single thing manually. We had to replicate all of the myriad complexities of nature piece by piece, which was actually good because it forced us to look at the world even more closely. Today, we have rendering engines that render, that create the images, which do a lot of calculating of the paths of light, which is really ultimately how we see things, right? Light comes from a light source. The photons come from the sun or a light source, and they hit an object and they bounce into our eye, and that is how we see something. And the surface material, the nature, the properties of the surface material determine how it looks to our eyes. And we're going to talk about a few things that make the world look the way it does. The very first thing, I'm going to switch over to, let's try this here for a second. What? Latvia, right on. Latvia, cool. All right, let's pull up this little image here. For people who are curious, I tend to work in Maya. I tend to use RenderMan as my Pixar's RenderMan as my primary rendering engine. I also use one called Bella. In this case, because I just installed this on my laptop, I'm using Arnold, which I don't really know that well, but well enough to probably get through this little demonstration. Okay, which I haven't planned, by the way, just so you know. I haven't worked out a lesson plan here, but I know what I want to say. Okay, so very first thing we have on the screen here are two little spheres. Two little greenish spheres. I don't know if you know, one is obviously shiny, and one is not shiny. The very first thing and it's amazing, most people do not know why something is shiny or not. And the answers that they give will almost always be wrong. It'll be like, well, it has clear coat on it, or it's wet. Well, that's true. A wet object can appear shiny, and and if it has clear coat on it, that can appear shiny. But why? What are the properties that make it shiny? Well, the truth is that the very first process that we look at when we're talking about a material is how rough the surface is, and ultimately, that's all it is. Ooh, earthquake! Whoa! Okay, hang tight. Hang tight. Rock and roll, baby. Oh my goodness gracious me. Hang tight there, hold on. Is that it? Is that all you got? Bitch, please. Come on. Couple of good rolls. Hang tight. You have to bring it harder than that. I'm in the middle of a fucking show. We're still getting it, by the way. We're still rolling a little bit. That's twice, that's twice that I've been on the air live during a earthquake. I will just tell you, too, in California, that's the fucking tipping point. You got people fucking so out of their minds with COVID paranoia. You start putting earthquakes in the shit, and that's just gonna. There's gonna be people leaping off the balcony right now. I think. Yeah, I can hear them. They're jumping off the balcony. How that's gonna go. Anyway, sorry for the interruption, but I'm glad we got that. That's what's going on in LA tonight. Earthquakes and quarantine. Sure, bring it on. Fucking end of times. Anyway, so the thing that makes a surface shiny, ultimately, or rough, or not, or dull, like you see the two blue balls here, is how rough or smooth it is. And it's really that simple. It almost doesn't matter what the material is. Any material that was polished enough to be smooth would be shiny. In fact, the truth is, even a piece of paper, which we would mostly think is a rough surface, if you could actually get it perfectly straight and see it at a perfect, like just above a 90-degree angle, it would essentially be a mirror. So what happens is light rays come from a light source and they hit the object, and if they more or less stay together, because the surface is smooth, it keeps the light rays, the angle of the light rays stays together. If the light rays come together, they bounce and they come to your eye still more or less together, that's going to make an object shiny. And it's this little highlight in there that you can see, does my cursor show up? I don't know. This little highlight in there, which is a reflection of the light source, will be prominent because the light rays are staying together. If the surface is rough, so that if you could get down there with a microscope, the little surface, it'd have little points and peaks and valleys in it, then when the light rays from a light source hit it, they scatter in all directions, and it blurs, essentially distributes the light rays and the reflection of the source, and you don't get something that is shiny. So that seems fairly simple, but there's a lot of levels of it. So, like, just as an example, just to show. So over here we've got a little sphere, right? This little sphere is fairly rough, or fairly smooth. And if I were to let's see here, if I were to increase, you'll see what happens as the surface gets rougher. We call this the specular highlight, but that little highlight on it where the light is starts to spread out. And so much of what our brains use, when it's rendering, hold on, cursor shows up when it's rendering. When you click, the audio goes freaky. All right, well, that's cool. Anyway, so much of what we use, what our brains use to determine what an object looks like, what material's made up, is first and foremost how rough and how smooth the surface is. This has kind of an eggshell kind of look to it, right? As we increase roughness, the surface gets more matte. The first thing, just a very basic thing I want to teach you about materials. Another thing is, let me show you something else about the properties of materials. I'll show you, let's make this smooth, and let's make this one smooth as well. Make it a little bit smoother. All right. This is an interesting. One of these two spheres is plastic, and one of these spheres is metal. Which one is which? You guys tell me. One of them is plastic, and one of them is metal. I'd play the Jeopardy theme, but I think the piano is disabled. Please feel free to chime in. Which one is plastic? Which one is metal? The left is plastic, somebody says, and the right is metal. Well, of course you are correct, and like 99% of people could recognize that. Somebody says they both look metal to me. For that person, I'll show you how I could make it clearer for you in a second and describe the phenomenon in just a minute here. If I did this, let me see. Although it's interesting that if you say it does look metal, then you're definitely going to experience something different as you go through the world very shortly. That might help you determine which one is left. I said plastic left, metal right. Seems I'm plastic blind. No, but you're not as observant as you will be at the end of this little thing. So like I said, most people can tell you which one is plastic or metal. Most people can tell that difference without even hesitating, without really knowing why. And this represents that disconnect between what we see and what we understand. Your brain has a set of criteria that it is applying to those images to make the determination. But many people are not consciously aware of what that is. And here's where a visual effects artist starts to have a skill and a craft. It's knowing what the real parameters are by which perception works. Now, I'll tell you the cheat, essentially, for metal surfaces versus other surfaces. And in this case, they're equally smooth surfaces, so they're both shiny. Metal surfaces, the reflection that comes off of a metal surface, this is an oversimplification, but a good one, will take on the color. The reflection itself will be tinted the color of the metal. This is even true for metals that appear to have no color. They always do. This is an oversimplification, but it's a good one. So the sphere on the right is a Christmas ball. The sphere on the left is a plastic object. The highlight, the reflection is white. You'll see the little dot of the sun is white on the left one, and it's tinted green on the metal one. This is the primary way to identify a metal material. Let me exaggerate the effect just a little bit by roughing up both surfaces just a little bit so that we can spread out that highlight. That highlight is often called a specular highlight. In truth, it's a reflection of the light source, but let me just spread that a little bit. Okay, so this should be clearer. Plastic versus metal. And it is going to be in the nature of the reflection that's coming off the surface. From now on, given that, you will probably look for that when you see metal or plastic objects. It's sort of a game, and thus immediately be more present and interested in the world around you, because cars especially are often either plastic or metal. It depends on the base coat that's underneath the paint. Now let's talk about something else. We know that roughness is a function of, or that reflection is a function of roughness. Very often, the other thing that's happening with materials is that they are made up of multiple layers. So they will have one component, like car paint, will have a base coat that has one component of metal in it, or not metal in it if it's just standard car paint, and it'll have a quality of roughness, which is usually sort of a medium roughness or a higher roughness, and then there's a clear coat, which is usually put on top of car paint. That's what we're simulating, right? This is sort of a clear coat look when we do this, and the more layers of clear coat, the shinier it gets. But in truth, in the real world, there are multiple layers of those highlights that are going on. So the clear coat itself is very, very smooth. Thus, it has a strong reflection. It is a very prominent and clear reflection, while the surface underneath it may have varying degrees of roughness. Let me just grab something here. And so this can lead to a very, very complex set of visual parameters. Let me just see if we can sort of do a thing here. So here you've got what's sort of a hybrid. Now the here on the left is a hybrid. It is a metallic object with a clear coat over it. So you're getting the visual properties, the metallic properties, which are almost entirely reflection based, with its own roughness, and then a clear coat on top, which has a white highlight, and they're sort of blending together. And when we go to replicate surfaces, we have to look very, very closely at those surfaces and see whether or not it's made up of multiple levels and multiple layers, and how all of those layers actually work in the real world. But I will tell you that, you know, if we were to take this other sphere here for a second, let's lower this again. You go out in the world later today, and you will see these two types of car paint. And they're the same color. These are the same color. One of them, they both have a clear coat on them. One of them has a metal base coat. That's the one on the left. And one of them has a standard, what is that, acrylic, latex? Well, that's not latex, acrylic paint on the right. And as you look at cars, you'll begin to see that you can recognize that, that discrepancy from a distance even. But that's why metallic paint, not just because it has metallic flakes in it, which is another aspect of it, you can see the little sparkles in it, but even from a distance, when you can't see the metallic flakes, you can see that the fall off of the reflection, the specular highlight on that material has a different nature. It falls off darker, faster on a metallic object than it does on a plastic or plastic-based or acrylic type of paint. And it's the thing that makes metal car paint look like metal car paint versus standard car paint. And Draco and I do this all the time. As we walk down the street, go on a coffee, and see a car distance. Is that metal paint, or is that metallic, or is it not metallic? Not metallic. And you can learn to recognize it right away. So we've got surface roughness is a huge component for how shiny something is, whether that's made up of multiple levels or not. And the inherent metallic nature of an object, of a material, is also a category. And these are huge oversimplifications, but this will get you. And these are both properties of reflection. Technically, reflectance is what color is when light comes and it reflects into your eye. There's another quality, which I'm going to take this one and see if we can't. I don't think I can do it right in here. Can I? Oh, can I do it right here? Let's try this. Can I do that right here? Will that let me do it? Right. Not accurate simulation, unfortunately, but it'll start. Let's see. Really? Does not have like a good. Does Arnold not have a good? Let's see. Does Arnold not have a good dielectric? Let's see one. The other quality that we're looking for, there's at least two other major categories of qualities. And like I said, when I first began in visual effects, these qualities were things to approximate in every way. Today, we have the advantage of them more calculated, I don't want to say automatically, but certainly more intelligently and much more holistically. We actually trace photons now. I'm just looking to see if there's a thing here. Let me just check one other little thing here. My sky dome, does that do? Can I do? I don't think. Bidirectional. Oh, right. Arnold isn't a bidirectional path tracer. That's too bad. All right. Anyway, it's okay. We can get through this. So the other quality, obviously, of of materials is their transmittivity, which is the degree to which light rays don't just bounce off the path, bounce off the surface and come back at you, but how they bend as they pass through the surface. Somebody says refraction. Yes, absolutely. And these are, dielectric materials, that is materials in which light pass, that's glass of all types. And what happens with glass is the light rays partially pass through it, depending on the nature of material, how much stuff is in it. But it's like water. Even water, the light's got to try to push through the surface, and as it tries to push through, it gets bent in different directions. And that's part of what makes a transparent material look transparent, and also casts what are known as caustic reflections. Let me switch for a second over to. Let me switch over to something here. Let me go up to my, show you what a caustic reflection is. Check this out. Let's see. All right, we got a little search here. So you've seen stuff like this. No. Let's look here. Really, can I not just make this bigger? Does this not? Why is everything not just work? Just make it bigger. Don't. There you go. Sort of. Okay. So this is an effect that you've seen, whereby the light rays are passing through a material, and because of the index of refraction is the process by which the light rays are bent, it ends up casting these cool little, they're called caustic reflections through the other side of the surface. You've seen them. This is something that's in your brain's vocabulary. But what's important is that without replicating this effect, your brain will never buy that this was a glass of water. Somewhere in your brain, this right side sphere, which isn't doing the caustic reflection, is not fully realized as glass. You may not consciously be aware of what's missing from this right sphere, but as a visual effects artist, I have to be. Because if I present you this image, in fact, this is the umbrella under which this is all mounted. If I fail to show you the things that your brain is aware of, whether you're consciously aware of them or not, you might not ever be able to tell me what is wrong with the image, but your brain will recognize it and will stay working on it and will never quite buy it as real. There are other very well-known, I just tell you, just as a primer in doing material studies in visual effects, you learn about surface properties like the difference between metals and other substrates. You learn about the softness or the roughness or smoothness of a material as it pertains to reflections. You learn about the nature, the index of refraction of materials that bend light, glasses, even gummy bears, anything whereby light passes through that changes the nature of the reflections and the shadows that they create, and you have to replicate those accurately in order for people to be able to buy it as real. Another major category, and I think we have some visual effects people in the audience, I can just kind of feel it, but another let's give this one, is what we call subsurface scattering. And you know this effect too. It's this one. It's the effect by which light scatters within the volume of a material. Like backlight your hands or backlight your ears. For many years in visual effects, this was sort of a holy grail. This was a nearly impossible kind of thing to replicate. But whenever there's all kinds of materials exhibit this quality. First of all, skin, that's an obvious one. Skin does this, your ears, the back of your ears. But so do anything like soap or wax or honey or any kind of liquid that's got a substrate in it. Gummy candies, that sort of thing. Also, interestingly, porcelain exhibits this quality, subsurface scattering. So these are the major categories. And most materials in the world are some combination of these properties. They are smooth or rough. They are metal or not. They transmit light through them, or they don't. They scatter the light inside their volume. That's subsurface scattering, or they don't. And then, on top of that, there are potentially multiple layers of materials which actually make the final material. There are other qualities too, such as microfacet displacement of a surface, which can lead to anisotropy, which I can talk about in a little bit. But my point is that it's actually through a fairly simple menu of options that even the most complex materials in the world can be recreated in sufficient such that you will believe they are what they are. I just saw like this pair of little sunglasses that's, let me just pull this off for a second. This little pair of sunglasses, I'll just show you this little exercise that was just sitting here. So if you were a visual effects artist and you were asked to replicate this material, this set of materials, obviously you have a few things at work here. You've got these lenses have transmission to them. The light is passing through them, because that's why you can see my finger through them, if even darkly. And you can see the reflection of the light on them, therefore you know that they're shiny. This material on the side is partially transparent. You can see through it. It's not super shiny because you can't see the reflection in it the same way, and it's doing subsurface scattering. It almost looks like a gummy kind of candy, right? It's almost got that sort of, get a little closer, sort of a gummy, I think these are one of Draco's sunglasses. It's the same combination of materials that we were talking about: medium surface roughness, transmittivity, subsurface scattering. Here you've got low roughness, right? And there's some transmittivity. That's what's going on in the broadest strokes. There are also about 100 billion other things going on with this, which visual effects artists also have to take into account, because if we don't, you'll never believe it that it's real, even if we get the materials right. The first one is obvious. The second I hold this up, let me go over here. Look at all this shit on the lenses. See that? You can see the scratches. Right? You can see the little things that happen when it's been kicked around. All of those little scratches in the surface are visible because the light rays that would normally be coming off the perfectly smooth surface are in the rough patches where it's been ground or rough or scratches, are showing up more and firing the light rays off in other directions. The real world is primarily made up of a million, billion, trillion, quadrillion, infinite imperfections and asymmetries, all of which your brain recognizes as being an integral part of what the world looks like, and all of which visual effects artists have to recreate in order to actually convince you that it is real. And all of this is the bane of our existence. Computers, let me just show you something. Let's say we take the, let's say we held this up and I asked you the question, is this symmetrical? Is this a symmetrical object? No. It's symmetrical with quotes around it. But the truth is that just because of where, the lenses are different, there's some extra scratches on this side, it's a little bit warped and a little bit bent. And when we make something like this in the computer, it's very easy. You can make one side and you can symmetrize it. And you can make it exactly the same. You can make it absolutely perfect. All of your things are right angles. If you look here, this is not coming perfectly off of the joining point. It's not exact. It's close, but it's not exact. There's an extra little gap here on this side. There's so much going on in this little object. And the nefarious killer part about replicating the world is that your eyes don't see that, but your brain does. And we spend almost all of our time putting all of those imperfections into the models that we create and the materials that we create. And what separates the women from the girls is knowing which of those qualities are most important in order to pass your bullshit detector and then go, and then have you take it for granted, and which ones are just going to be excessive and you'll never see them. Generally, because it's so much work, visual effects artists always opt toward, they'll never see that. And the truth is that the human eye is so discerning, is so amazing, that they're almost always underestimating what people are capable of seeing. The kind of photoreal work that I do is usually, it's like in high-resolution prints or advertisements where it is right up on the surface. And so much work has to go into little things that you wouldn't ever think, tiny little pieces of dust or lint or the corner of oil from a fingerprint, which shows up in the real world. You don't consciously see it, but your brain does. That's where the work goes. And so often when you see a visual effects shot and you don't believe it is real and you're not sure why, it's almost, one of the biggest reasons is not that they didn't get the big strokes right. It's that they didn't get the imperfections right because it takes so long. Somebody said it's just like quantizing notes. That's exactly right. What you end up with is a perfect performance that doesn't represent the world. Even the most precision manufactured item on the planet has a million little asymmetries in it. There are no perfect edges. There are no absolutely perfect 90-degree. Everything's had a little chip in it, or gets a little piece of dust, or a scratch, or a fleck of paint, something. And so what you realize, what you get a respect for when you do visual effects, is that, Jesus, if you can film a real object, film a real object, because the amount of time it takes to remake all that stuff in visual effects is unreasonable. Somebody said here, let's see, I'm preparing to get into learning VFX. Oh yeah, from so many softwares to choose from, which would you recommend to start? Maya. Now, let me pull something up here. I can go online. This is the modern world for you. I can go up here and I can probably just put an R2-D2, which was my first official Star Wars job, and almost without exception, no shortage of these images will be mine that somebody stole. That's just a thing. Yeah, I see two already, but let me see. Let me see if I can find one of my. I'll show you something. I'll just put my name in. We'll find it that way. All right. So here's an example. This is the CG R2-D2 that I did for Lucasfilm. To do this particular R2, I went to the Lucasfilm archives and, oh wow, that's cool. They have that one too? All right, yeah, cool. I went to the Lucasfilm archives and we unboxed 3 of the original R2-D2s, and I analyzed the surfaces and took photos. So what I can tell you is that on first blush, you can see the dirt and you can see, a few other things here and there. If we get up close, you can see an awful lot of other things going on. You can see that this panel is bent and warped and pulled off the surface. In fact, every one of them is warped, bent, scratched, pulled out. It got caught on a carpet. Just unbelievable amounts of chips and damage and there's grease, and then there's some extra paint on it. And here's something some kid dragged across the front, and the grease that's dripped, and this little thing, and but that goes on and 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 on. This took me ultimately the better part of a year. And if you look at the wireframe mesh of it, you can kind of see all the little dents and imperfections in the surface. But ultimately, unless all of those things were done, our eye is never going to buy it as real. And it becomes, like I said, a borderline unreasonable amount of work. Here's another image. It was another image. What are you doing taking my stuff? Don't put it on your site. I didn't say you could do that. Here's another shot of him. I just go onto sites if I want to find my work. I just go to other sites that aren't authorized to do it. But if you look here, all the stuff, the little dents that I had to put in his helmet, or his dome, all these little things, all the subsurface scattering and transmittivity that's going in here, all the blooming of the light source that a camera picks up there's so much going on in here. I can't even tell you that it is totally unreasonable. This is a totally unreasonable amount of work. That said, if nobody told you, your eye's going to buy it as real, which is apparently why they put it on the site there. I have a YouTube video somewhere of me taking that little CG model and doing a little handheld camera walk around of him. No? Oh, so it doesn't play the video? You scumbag, you bitch. Really? You could tell that I was streaming it? Is that really true? That's annoying. Anyway, but you can kind of see, there's a little video. It's on my CG channel if you've never seen it, of taking that model and actually doing kind of a little handheld camera walk around of it. Unless somebody had tipped you off to the fact that it was CG, all of the things that your brain goes to determine whether it's real or not are there. It's just an unfair, unreasonable amount of work. So this is why, when we go to movies and there's 10,000 visual effects shot, not all of those shots can get the love that R2 got, or any of the other things that I've done that are photoreal. And so there's always going to be this big disconnect between, like the stuff that looks really good and the stuff that doesn't, such that it's always better to shoot something for real than to do it in visual effects. Now, just by comparison, let me just, we looked up R2 Verta? Is that what we looked up? Let me just pull this thing back up here. However, so here's my real one. This is the one that I built. It's my actual one that's sitting, you've seen him sitting next to me in my living room. Does this not scroll down? Okay. And you'll see on the real one here, all the same stuff. Just a million little imperfections. And if you really were to look at this image with take any real time on it, it would be hours before you could catalog all of the asymmetries and imperfections. And yet, that is where photoreal CG exists, and nowhere else. So a lot of times when you go to movies and you wonder why the effects are good or the effects are bad, it is almost never having anything to do with the talent of the people working. And it's usually not for them not understanding the broad stroke stuff of materials that we talked about. It is what it would require to replicate all of the things that nature does for free with a real object. And we've only talked about the nature of the surface and the materials. We haven't even begun talking about all the things that happen in a camera and through a camera lens when you shoot an object. And we haven't talked about all of the physics. Your brain has a lifetime of experience in all of these departments, and one of the most finely bullshit detectors in the universe. And unless all of those things agree with your unconscious, subconscious experience, you'll never really buy it as real and never really be emotionally connected to it. In fact, I will tell you about an interesting phenomenon, which is that as you start to approach photoreal, and it's, of course, like everything else, it's that last small percentage where all the stuff happens. When the brain can't immediately categorize something as real or not, it works on it harder and harder and harder. It scrutinizes the image more and more. And so there's this little tipping point. In fact, your brain is much happier to take a Pixar movie, which has qualities of photorealism, but it isn't. It mostly behaves the way light does, but the surfaces aren't real. And your brain goes, okay, well, that's not real, but I get it. And it stops working on it. It just accepts it. It's all relative. Okay, I got it. I know what it is. Yeah, that's metal, that's plastic, kinda, but it all agrees together, and it stops working at it. And somebody talked about the Uncanny Valley. The Uncanny Valley is kind of it, but the Uncanny Valley is generally just reserved for the dead, soulless eyes of characters, which I've actually done a lot of studies on myself, and there's something very interesting. I'll talk about that. So in order to cross that threshold, you have to make some very, very hard decisions about what you're going to do with your time in order to cross people over that thing. And it is not usually just sheer number of things. It's usually the nature of them. But you can see that if you were a visual effects artist, now everywhere in the world, you're going to be looking for all of the things that make a thing look the way it does. Go right now or anywhere in your house and look at a wall that your brain will tell you on a conscious level is a blank wall, and now go look at it again. Look at the corner or the seam of any room, and you'll see it's like this. It's got all kinds of shit in the paint. There's a million things going on just in the wall seam. Or look at the baseboard. Look at 6 inches of a baseboard and count all of the amazing asymmetries and things in the world, and recognize that you may think that you don't see them, but your brain does. And the surest way to find that out is when we try to present you that same baseboard without any of that stuff on it. It doesn't look real. You could never tell us why, but that's the reason. So part of the reason I wanted to mention this is that what it means is that the world around us is orders of magnitude more complex and more varied and more interesting than our brains tend to present to us. And it does that for all kinds of reasons of efficiency and path of least resistance and other sorts of things. But I can just tell you that when taking a catalog and an inventory of the actual look of materials around you is part of what you do, the world's visually way more interesting. And you are much more a part of it because you're really looking at things instead of passing past them. And that's really how most of us go through life, passing things, when there's a million things that went on there at once. And like I said, we know that those things are important because when we don't give them to you, you don't buy it. Part of this, of course, somebody said, right, like the visual blind spot, the brain owns self-deception. It would be an overwhelming amount of information to present to you all the time. Somebody told me once when I was a kid, something which is true, but it's incredible, which is that your brain has seen every leaf on every tree you've ever seen, which is true. I mean, every leaf that you can see was in there. As you walked down the street, every single thing went in. It all went in. It was all inside the visual. It was all there. Your brain just, you don't need this. You can't, it's too much. But it was in there. Which is why, when we go back to that initial example I gave you of the car and the dog, if I recreated that shot in visual, and I got the car right, and I got the dog and the woman right, but I didn't move the leaves on the trees in the wind, it might take you a long time, or maybe never, to figure out something's wrong here. I don't know what's wrong. And the truth is, it's because the little leaves in the back weren't barely moving, which your brain can totally see. It's really unfair how sensitive our eyes are. Somebody said, I felt the CG Unreal Engine sets for Mandalorian read 100% real. Oh, that's cool. Well, yeah. So, that's another thing. Those are called hard surfaces. And in visual effects, that's a different category, especially now. There are usually 2 types of people: hard surface modelers and then organics or biological people. I'm a hard surface guy. I don't generally do characters, which is the animation of stuff. And I'll tell you something that happens in visual effects with animation in a second. regarding that. That's really interesting because I know some of the world's best animators. But solid surfaces, jet planes, buildings, that sort of thing are generally easier than fleshy organic stuff. It just tends to be the case. So when guys start out, usually the place for them to start is in hard surface stuff. And actually, that's what I like because it's spaceships, character animators. However, while we're on the subject of visual effects and character animators, very often there are schools of style in animation, of course. There are some that do very Disney type of stuff that you see, sort of almost like Don Bluth came into the digital world, and then there are more naturalistic things. But one thing that happens that young animators often run into this problem is, and you've probably seen this on like behind the scenes videos, is an animator will have a mirror on their desk and they'll try to replicate, they'll try to do a character speaking, and so they'll go, I went to the and they'll store, and they'll do it like this, right? Or they'll grab for something and they'll watch it in slow motion, and then as they do that, I went, and then they start animating their exact motions on the character. Makes sense. The problem is that you see this in animations all the time. What the animated character ends up doing is going, I went to the store. Because how you say that at speed is totally different than how you'd say it if you slowed it down. It seems like a little thing, but so often in animation, you see a thing that becomes artificial and unreal is because a otherwise very efficient motion that might have been much subtler has been broken down into its individual components and then just sped up, and that's not how the world works. And you can see that in animations all the time. You can always tell whether the person was aware of that or not. And it ends up with these, and I've seen it in Avenger movies, I've seen it in trailer shots, and the characters are doing something that might have made sense slow, but not how you would do it in the real world. And again, most people not aware consciously of that, but the physics reads wrong. The motion reads wrong. And it kills a shot that an otherwise really talented person might have been working on. This is so common. While I was thinking about this too, on the subject of asymmetry, I'm going to bring something up here. This is one of my. Show you something. This is one of the most iconic. This is a real nerd kind of thing, but this is a good thing. Let's find a really good image for it. Let's see. Can I bring this up? Okay. I'm going to bring up an image here. You know this guy. One of the most iconic villains, helmets, masks. A lot of people don't realize that this mask, which was sculpted by hand, is completely whacked out and asymmetrical. The left side and the right side are totally, completely different. They're even painted different. One cheek is higher than the other. One's pushed in on one side. This is off. That's off. I mean, the thing is a fucking wonky mess if you ever see the real ones. It's a wonky, asymmetrical mess, just like real faces are. And it's part of what makes it interesting and compelling. And here's Darth Vader from the Star Wars prequels Where's that picture? There was a picture. I saw it. There it is. Which I don't know if you can see. Can you bring this up here? Which your brain, unless you're really not observant, which you might recognize does not look like Darth Vader. And the reason is because they symmetrized the mask. They took the left half and they copied it over to the right half. And if you've ever done this with your face, it's not you. It doesn't look like you. To even do this represents a cluelessness about the most basic things about characters and people and asymmetries. It's fitting for the Star Wars prequels. However, that's just one little thing I wanted to just point out, is that even on big, huge productions with otherwise talented people, just tragic, obvious day 101 missteps like that happen. And it happened because of a lack of respect for the asymmetry of the world. He took iconic faces and mirrored them. Which, if you're even going to do that, then you would know that faces, when they're mirrored, don't look like them. But maybe you don't know that Darth Vader is really asymmetrical, which, if you're doing Darth Vader for the movie, how do you not know that? But anyway, so having a respect for the complexity of the world, the asymmetries of the world, is one of the most important qualities for a visual effects artist to have. Understanding the nature of materials and light, hugely important for a visual effects artist to have. A respect for the actual physics of motion, cloth, or any of the dynamics that we want to replicate. Something that we have to be consciously aware of and study and observe in our life. And because of that, this is part of the reason I'm teaching Draco visual effects, and why I think everybody would benefit from a season of visual effects instruction, is simply for the discipline of being more present in the world, of being more aware of what we're looking at all the things around us, really looking at them. Because first of all, you find out that they're really interesting. There's a shit ton going on in the world. Somebody said, Mike, do you play the stock market? No, I don't. No, I did briefly, with the suspicion that it's all insider trading. If you really want to make the money, which is why I would do it. I want to make the money. It's all insider trading, and I don't have any insiders. So, he died recently, but I had a kind of Rain Man kind of uncle. He was a Rain Man-y kind of guy. And he could, like, you know, he could kind of work it. He would just look at the numbers and, oh, yeah, it's going on. I know it's going. And he could make some money, but he wasn't Warren Buffetting his way, because, like, that's the thing, is when you ever get to see, like, you know, Warren Buffett, it's like, I just read the company stock. Fuck you, you did not. You're all playing golf together. You know what's going on. It's all insider trading. That said, if I'm wrong and you know how to make $1 billion in the stock market, you just let Mike know. Except everybody I know has just lost their fucking shirt at the stock market, so whatever. Somebody asks, Mike, will we ever get to see Legacy? Interesting that you say that. I mean, Disney has seen it. Fox has seen it. That was during their corporate merger, so nothing has come of it. But I was talking about it. I may bring all the Legacy videos. It's a Star Wars restoration, a 4K Star Wars restoration. I may bring them over to YouTube just so people can see that. I didn't have it on YouTube forever because I didn't want to call down the thunder, but it doesn't matter anymore, so I may do that. Anyway, so another thing about visual effects, and this is especially for any of you who are thinking about getting into it, the thing that we do all the time when we're trying to recreate the world, like let's say you were a visual effects artist and you had a Dr. Pepper bottle here, and you had to do this in CG. Now, right away, even just what we've talked about, I hope that you can appreciate all the fucking wrinkles and the inside little dots of liquid that are in there, and the nature of the liquid itself, and the plastic cap, which of course has some subsurface scattering in it. If you were to hold it up to light, you could see partially through it. Look through the edges there. And it's also got, you know, a certain degree of surface roughness, which is why it's not super shiny, but a little shiny, and all sorts of things. The printing going on the side. I mean, this fucking thing is a month of work to do really, really right. Maybe a week. All the little bubbles that are in there in the surface. This is fucking crazy how much stuff is going on in this little bottle. Okay, what was my point? Oh, yes. But when we're doing photoreal stuff, one mistake that visual effects people will do as we're working in their system and they're going over here, and let's say we're looking at this red thing, and I bring up, and I'm working in Maya here, right? And I'm like, well, I got to do this cap. So I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to turn this sphere into this cap. So I go, let's see. Well, first it's kind of reddish. This is like how we do it. It's kind of a pinkish reddish. It's kind of dark. It's somewhere in this world. Maybe it's a little. What? What's going on? I just did this. Oh, wrong thing. Sorry. There you go. So do that. Let's turn this off for a second. Right here is that I'm looking at it with my eyes. And all cameras see the world completely differently than the human eye does. So when I teach visual effects, so I've done some training in visual effects, one of the very first things that I remind people about when we're doing photoreal work, which is what it's called when we're trying to convince somebody that a thing is real, is not to forget the word photo. It's not how it looks to our eye, it's how it looks on camera. So if you have to do this Dr. Pepper bottle, the very first thing to do is take pictures of it and work from those. Because ultimately, one of the other things that our brains are programmed for is how photographed images differ from ones that we actually see up close. We have an entire experiential library of those. When we go to a movie or we see a television show, after a lifetime of experiences, our brains know that a camera cannot capture the same range of bright and dark at the same time that our eyes can. And you've experienced this with a camera yourself. You've gone into a room and it's dark and you can see perfectly fine, and you put the camera in and it's fucking black. And if you make it brighter, then it doesn't look right. And that's because in terms of the total dynamic range, just like in volume, the brightest thing and the darkest thing, our eyes can handle a huge range of that. Cameras have a very limited range. They have to sort of choose which they're going to demonstrate. So when we start replicating items, we not only have to get all of the properties of the real world right, but we also have to get all the properties of the cameras right, and not create a visual which couldn't be photographed, which wouldn't appear that way on a camera, because even that whole set of things is actually well within people's subconscious or unconscious experiential bullshit detector. That certainly people couldn't tell you why, but it's true. And that includes dust on the lens distortion, what's known as chromatic aberration, where imperfections in the glass can actually cause little halos and fringes, color fringes around edges. What happens in a real world when you take a picture of something with a camera is crazy. And you only learn that when you go and try to replicate it. And since you can't possibly do all of it all the time, that's why a $200 or $300 million movie will still have a shit ton of really obviously CG shit in it. They can't all get the love, which is why you can take a page from Steven Spielberg's Jurassic Park book and only have a handful of visual effects in it and spend the rest of the time telling a fucking story and or putting something real in front of a camera. As a visual effects artist, when I'm directing, I go into visual effects kicking and screaming because I know what is required to make something look real. Somebody mentioned two other properties of materials, anisotropy and iridescence. Iridescence is usually interference. I know what you mean. Let's just show people what those two other things. Anisotropy has to do with when you have a surface, and a surface has little tiny, usually microscopic grooves on it. If they happen to run in a like say they all run in a single direction, the little shiny reflection of the light source will be stretched in a perpendicular fashion. It happens on hair. It happens on like satin. Let me show you. It's called an isotropic reflection. This is another little, which you'll now see in metals. You see it on the bottom of your pot lids. Let me bring up the computer, this so you can see some examples. Anisotropy. There you go. So that little sort of crosshatch look on the top of, that's the reflection being spun or stretched because there are circles, little micro circles on the bottom surface of that pan. Let's see if there's a more obvious examples. It's this classic look. That's created by circular microgrooves. These reflection patterns are broken up by circular microgrooves. Hair does it. So here's a great example, hair. What happened? Yeah, not that. No, I was just, look the picture. Just show me. God, I fucking hate, just, can we just do this? Can we just, how do you open up the picture? Well, it's just maybe go into here and just blow it up. Okay, so with hair, you see that the reflection is stretched horizontally. See how it's stretched horizontally? That's because the little hair fibers are running vertically. Thousands of little hair fibers are running vertically, which act like micro grooves in that vertical direction and stretch the reflection horizontally. That's called anisotropy versus isotropy or isotropy, which is how standard surfaces which don't have those micro facet displacements or grooves on them behaves. That's just LP records, exactly. That's another thing that you will now see everywhere in the world. You'll see them everywhere. You'll see anisotropy. In fact, you want to impress all the girls, just tell them, oh, check out the anisotropic reflections on that, whatever. And she'll be like, check, please. Iridescence, you've seen that on beetles. There's so much we could be talking about. We could be talking about Fresnel curves. We could be talking about, generally, when you have things that are nanometers thick and have different indexes of refraction, they can bend the light in ways that lead to colors like purple and green. And you've seen that like on beetles. It's called iridescence. It's another factor which we can replicate in CG, iridescence. There we go. It's also on soap bubbles, yes. Soap bubbles are a combination of iridescence. You've seen that sort of rainbow-looking stuff. It's a combination of, this is a dielectric, which means it's a transmissive object that's using refraction. The light is bending through it, which is why the reflection's all upside down, and you can see through it. And it's got some surface tension to it, which is creating all the iridescence, those purples and greens. And you can look, if you see the tree behind it is just a little bit out of focus. That's because the material itself has some roughness to it, which is scattering the light. A million billion things going on with a little soap bubble, including the fact that the surface is actually changing the entire time, which would have to be animated and all that sort of stuff. So you get this incredible respect for the visual world that we live in, which again is why I'm mentioning this. I don't dispersion, you mean diffraction? I think you might be talking about. Diffraction is another quality. That's the prismatic splitting of light that happens with diamonds, and that's another thing that you have to look at. So, like I said, I'm only scratching the surface, but I'm telling you these things and even bothered talking about all these with respect to the ways in which we go about our lives. Because it is a richer, more satisfying life, and a more interesting life, and a more present life to begin to look with intention at the things around us that we take for granted. It actually grounds us in our life, in the moment, connects us to the world, and it's also a way more interesting life than we think it is, just visually. If we start to do the visual effects artist discipline of actually really, really, really looking at a thing. And it doesn't matter what object it is, it doesn't matter how commonplace it is, there's a metric fuck ton of stuff going on with it. Somebody said, amazing. Did you talk about the umbra, penumbra of shadows? We haven't talked about that yet. There's so much we could talk about. Light itself and the propagation of light was actually a fairly substantial breakthrough in rendering technology. That's the computer finally drawing the image. Your voice is delayed? Oh, not that thing again. Really? Hope not. My voice really delayed. Let's see if that helps. Like I said, we're only scratching the surface. But the point of this wasn't to teach you how to be a visual effects artist or to even do a comprehensive discussion about the properties of the world. It was to give you just a little taste of what it is that we have to do. The interesting part is that you're, probably going to notice stuff in movies from now on or TV. But that's not the point. The point is what you notice in your life. Because the benefits of it are almost immeasurable. It's a very different life the more aware of it you are. And our life has a lot of distractions and we're surrounded by glowing rectangles. It's mostly glowing rectangles. And it turns out that the world has way better resolution and is way more interesting. And, for my own little boy, obviously, I was not going to lock him in a house without glowing rectangles. But, and we've never really been like less glowing rectangles. We just was like more world, which is sort of two sides of the coin, except one is no, you can't. And the other one is, hey, look at this. It's just a different thing. Am I still delayed? Let me know. Any other questions about this? This was like, how long have I been doing this? I don't know, a while. Like I said, this was just a little thing. Oh, a question for all of you here. Why mirrors reflect and flip horizontally, but not vertically? CAD is a whole different field. Computer, why CG movies look bad? Again, if we had the time, and if a person has the aesthetic sensibility to recognize a thing, given enough time, you could probably make everything look pretty damn close to photoreal. Some things not, it just depends. And by the way, what's interesting about it is not whether it's a real thing or not. Like, you can make an alien with skin that doesn't exist appear real if because human brains are going to try to categorize materials into one of the categories of things that it knows. So in that case, when you're doing something alien, figuring out the ways in which you can relate it and tie it and send the clues to the brain of things that are terrestrial, is really important. Like, the idea that you're going to present a material that's impossible will merely frustrate a brain and will not work. Somebody asked, is CAD a whole different? So computer-aided design is a different methodology for creating digital models. I do about half CAD work, which is like, CAD is for product designers, architects. It's usually very precise computer-aided drawing where the models themselves are intended to be manufactured. Since I do a lot of manufacturing, I will often work in computer-aided design programs like Rhino or SolidWorks. For visual effects, the digital models have different, they're not usually bound for manufacturing, and there are more efficient ways to set up the geometry for rendering and displacement and other things that we do. So when it's time to model for visual effects, I usually use Modo. I usually use subdivision surfaces, which is a whole other thing. So again, they're related. They're just two different ways of realizing digital models. And horses for courses. You'll use the ones that are appropriate for the kind of job you're working on. Somebody said, from a form of mindfulness practice and meditation too, yes. I think that's one of the benefits of being an artist and a visual, whether it's visual or audio, is that you have to be aware. Yeah, for sure. And it's actually, by the way, one of the reasons that it's important to have art and music in the education of young children. Because it changes their brains. It changes the way that their brains process and see the world. Yesterday, if you saw, I showed you through 24 hours of Draco's, drawing, and it was like night and day by simply giving him some umbrella concepts. But now he sees cars differently. Like, we were driving in the car the other day, and he was saying a car, and he was looking, and he goes, yeah, that looks like 3.5 wheel lengths between those wheels. And I was just like, there you go. He's looking at the world yet again differently and has an awareness of it and an understanding of it. And it's more interesting to him, that little car ride. It's really, really, really cool to see the world again. So for modern CG films, is it just that there's too much work? Yes, because they're so reliant on it. They don't have particularly compelling stories or drama, so it's got like 10,000 visual effects shots in it. And that's why there's like 9 minutes of credits of 1 million people on it. It's just impossible to make every shot be great when you have 3,000 effect shots. If you have 300, they can all get the love. Like I said, I've made my career in visual effects doing photoreal work. And in the capacities that I was doing it, it was the hardest one. A lot of times if something's on film and it goes by in a second, you can probably get away with some stuff. If it's a high-resolution print in a magazine, which for legal and aesthetic reasons must look real, then you got to go crazy in order to make sure that nobody could ever in a billion years tell, no matter how much they looked at it. But there's going to be a huge world between those two, and the talent that'll come in a view painter or a texture lighting guy is going to be knowing where to put that effort, because you don't have all the time in the world. And plus, the other thing is, all of these things are harder and harder for computers to draw and create. So we can do really complex visual things, and it would take 1,000 years for the computer to draw a frame of it. And so that's another thing that we're always up against, is the technical limitations of a computer or of our rendering stations in order to actually be able to render all the images in time. And what happens in this visual world? I mean, again, we are scratching the tiny. We are just skimming off the surface of how deep this world is. What it would be like doing a primer on composition and orchestration. Like, wait, that's a lifetime's worth of study. Well, so is visual effects in its own right. It's just that all of us can benefit from taking more stock in observing the world around us, and plus this might make you that much more brutal and discerning when you go to the movies, which I think is a good thing. So again, not much more to say on that. Practical and CG is the best combination for making it right. Yeah, whenever you can, you get 1 million things for free when you put something in front of a camera. So my order as a director is, number 1, it's practical. Number 2, is there any other way I can get this idea across? And then number 3, okay, CG. Because if I do that with every shot, with everything, and I don't just get lazy, just make that CG, and it gets totally out of control. What happens now, is like there are a lot of things that happen when you shoot against green screen. There's green screen spill, and it reflects in objects. So R2-D2 has a shiny dome, right? So they shoot him on a green screen, and the green screen is reflected in the dome. Now, there are some ways we can color correct it out, but very often the fucking whole green screen, the things are in the dome, and some poor bastard has to go and rotoscope all that out, when if somebody just took 5 seconds, they might have been able to block that stuff from the reflection, and then nobody would have to do that. People get very lazy about CG, or they think CG can just do anything. So like, we'll just shoot it green screen. No, it's not going to work. You don't have a year to make that background. Just fucking put a half wall in a picture. It's so it's just one of those things that if you really force yourself to find any other way to tell your story, then you'll end up with a limited shot count, and then you have a good chance of being able to do them in convincing ways that people don't get distracted by. So, when is it better to go for practical effects? Whenever you can, and the decision should be a combination between the director and a conscientious visual effects supervisor. When I've been a visual effects supervisor, that's my first word is as far as I'm concerned, the visual effects count in this movie should be 0. That's just to tell the story, have a good piece of dialogue. Do the tentacles have to come out of the water? Could the tentacles already be out of the water? Why? Why? Because the fluid dynamics simulation. That's why. because fluid dynamics particle, that's 1 million. You don't have weeks to render that on this movie. So as a visual effects artist, my job to talk to a director about is to try to make it look good and really make sure we really need it. And if you have a young and experienced director, they might just be, oh, just make it CG. Tiger. It's not ILM. We don't have 2 years to do it and 10,000 hours of rendering a night, and you don't have $200 million. So always take drama and practical stuff over visual effects. So for those of us who want to learn, let's say it's day one and you had to start over, how do we start? What's the best process? So when I was coming up, boy, this goes into something we were talking earlier. I was what became later known as a generalist. Like everything else, visual effects ended up, as there became more and more visual effects, computer effects, the jobs became highly compartmentalized. And so you end up in a situation or not where one guy just does this part of the arm for 6 months, you know? And so by the time it shows up in the movie, it's going like this because he's just sitting there working on this fucking arm. He doesn't do the whole character, he just does the arm. Or one guy just does the ships and he doesn't do the buildings, and it's all compartmentalized. And somebody else models it, and somebody else lights it, somebody else does the texture, somebody else animates it, another person or people composite the images with the background. It's all these different people. When I was coming up, there was no all these other people. You had to learn to do all of those skills. And of course, that puts you in a way better position, both from a work and practical standpoint and also from a aesthetic and understanding standpoint. So if you're going to start in visual effects, you need to develop, at least on some level, those categories of skills. You need to be able to do some polygonal modeling and subdivision surface modeling, more than CAD, some modeling. You need to be able to texture and light in one of the common packages, RenderMan or V-Ray. Arnold would be okay, but hardly anybody uses it. Those would probably be my go-tos. You need to be able to do some basic compositing work. That could be After Effects. It doesn't have to be Nuke. Some at least hard surface animation. And you are best to study all of those disciplines at the same time. You also should get a camera and or take a lot of pictures of the world and start looking at the ways in which cameras capture the world and thinking about shot composition, image composition. All of those things show up in a shot. Over the course of doing it, you will also become part technician because you'll run into issues where a thing doesn't render properly or it takes too long or whatnot. But studying photography, and the best way to do that is doing some photography. Take some portraits, take some pictures of objects, learning about three-point lighting, learning about the rule of thirds, learning about the ways in which lenses distort images or in which objects will bloom. Those are important things to learn, even on a basic level. Being able to do some basic modeling and having a respect at all times in your process for asymmetries and imperfections, learning to do even some basic texture painting and all those things, and then building those scales up together as a generalist is the way to do it. And it all begins with you making a conscientious cataloging of the world around you. That which we're recommending for everybody to do, you should doubly do and make notes and make little exercises for yourself. Okay, I'm going to make this pencil. This is a fairly simple object to model, sort of, until you really, really start looking at it. There's a million things going on in this pencil, and every second that you spend learning to do that in a package or multiple packages will serve you well. I recently saw John Knoll's Star Wars hangar recreation that you reminded. It looked pretty awesome and realistic. Well, John's good, and John taught me a lot about visual effects early. One of the very first things I ever modeled was a TIE fighter, and I sent it to John. This is back when he was on AOL, and he had some nice things to say about it and also some really useful things. He gave me this saying, he said, it doesn't have to be real, it has to look real. That's actually where I started getting a handle on this philosophy, because my original idea was that if I modeled every single tiny little detail into an object, it would look real, and that wasn't guaranteed. It had to be the right details. It had to be the ones that trick the brain into believing it's real. It was a really important piece of information, and he gave that to me at the very start of my career. But it says now, it seems like CG is always the first choice, and largely because of inexperience and a lack of appreciation for what we've talked about tonight. and just laziness. Just do it CG. And because there's sort of CG has the world of visual effects has done a lot to disservice to itself by trying to present its process as being like you put tab A into slot B. If you read Cinefex or any of the like trade magazines, they're always bullshit. They always take these super complex shots. They're like, well, we modeled the shot and we scanned the actor and then we just animated it. We composited the background, hit the render, and that's not how that went. There was a million things didn't work. There was rendering artifacts and interpenetrations, and the simulation was failing and blah. I mean, it's always like that. They never say that. So directors, I think, and they watch the behind the scenes, and it's always like that in the behind the scenes. Well, we just wrote a new shader that approximates that was like 6 months of R&D. What the fuck? And so young directors watch that and they get the idea that, CG is just a thing. Oh, you just do CG. It's not. It's a fucking nightmare. Always. Every shot. And if there's like one major list serve for all the pro visual effects people that I'm on, and it's just like a litany of, oh, you know what it really took to get that shot out? It's a lot of that. Rendering and visual effects make me happy in making music. Music is usually a lot more direct, but it can be the same thing if you're spending all day fucking around with patches trying to get stuff to sound real when it never will. The time and money you need to build a good PC to render fast is insane. Well, that's true, and usually one is never enough. I have multiple computers, I have whole render blades, because otherwise I'd never be able to hit deadlines. And that doesn't matter. It's independent of what engine I use. What's the difference between a normal map and a subsurface mask or map? Clarify your terms there. I taught 3ds Max for 12 years. Yeah, right on. I found it much more intuitive for beginners than Maya if you're teaching yourself at home. Yeah, you know what? The reason I wouldn't recommend Max first, well, I would say this. I would recommend Max if you're going to go into games, Maya if you're going into anything else. I mean, just having also worked with Max and having been with Maya since day one, Maya can be all kinds of stuff. It's like PC Mac. It's still just like create, primitive, draw. I mean, like it's not a thing. It does all the shit. From a polygonal modeling standpoint, I'd probably take Max over Maya. It just depends where you're going. If you're going into feature films, you do Maya. If you want to go into feature and TV, Maya. If you're going into games, Max. That's pretty much the agreement. Max is a nightmare Max is a really horrible program under the hood for what that's worth. I know one of the world's best programmers. You could get him on a 3-hour rant just by mentioning Max because he had to write code for it and plugin for it. But the program works. They're all Autodesk anyway. So, but if I had to choose, I would choose Maya myself. Somebody said, every frame is a painting. That's a YouTube channel. I can't remember the guy's name. Ethan, maybe? I don't know. But he's done some really good, let's take a look at some stuff on his channel. I've actually enjoyed a few of his videos. Every frame is a painting. Okay, so, yeah, so somebody said the difference between normals and subsurface. Yeah, a surface normal is the perpendicular off of a surface. Off this, if I hold it this way, the surface normal is pointing directly off the surface. No matter where this is, the surface normal is coming directly off the surface. A normal map is an image which approximates things that would be happening to the normals on a surface. It's a trick. It's a fake. It's not real. Displacement is real. The actual geometry will change. Normal makes it look like the object has changed. And if you change the normals, you change the look of the surface. So you could use a normal map of alligator skin, and it would kind of look like alligator skin. It would seem like it had the ridges and peaks and valleys in it. The normals would be changed like an alligator skin would. But if you really got up close, it really wouldn't be up and down. It's just a trick. It's like an illusion. Displacement actually changes the geometry. Now you could actually get in there and there'd be the hills and valleys of the actual alligator skin. Displacement takes a lot more calculations and a lot more time to render, and you have to set up your modeling and polygons in a way to take advantage of it, but that's the difference there. Subsurface is, as we talked about, the scattering of material, the scattering of light inside a volume. Soap, candle wax, honey, gummy bears, semen. Oh, you're trying to use Maya with Unity 3D. Yeah, and Unity's a great engine. I happen to know the head of development, rendering development over there, and a great engine. But yeah, even the advanced terms you can just do Google searches on. But don't forget that in the end, you will ultimately be served by how well you understand the way the world is photographed. Because that's the target, the comparative target that you'll be following. If you just want to learn for yourself or get to work on indie games, Blender is also a good package. That's true, good advice. Blender is also a good package, and I think Blender is still free. You know, when you go into jobs, I mean, I can tell you most studios be happy that you learn Blender, but they have written all their own custom pipelines and their own custom plugins, usually for Maya or Max if it's a game place. And so it's just usually what it is. You know, if there's a particular shop you want to work at or something, then you want to find out what their platforms are and learn those. But visual effects software, modeling software, rendering software, it's a lot like cars. They almost always get to the same kind of place in the same sort of ways. All cars got it's the steering wheel and the column and the accelerator. They might be in slightly different places, but you're going to basically, you can drive any car. And so it does not take long to learn a new package generally. Like you'll go looking for this in this. Well, oh, that's how they do it in this one. In this one, it's this. In this one, it's this. It's the same thing. But like I said, for musicians or non-visual effects people, the simple act of connecting with the world is gold. More places I would recommend to further studying. Trying to minimize wasting time learning After Effects now. Most tutorials could be 5 minutes instead of 4 to 5. Yeah, they're really terrible. You know, I learn differently. I can't immediately tell you a resource for any of this, like a place where you could go. I mean, I would do the classes myself. I just haven't. I'm sorry, I can't do everything. But I've actually thought about it because I would do them the same way I do the music classes, and I could make things simpler because they are mostly torture and people are boring. And then you get some people. You ever get these ones, and they just talk like this, and it's monotone. And so I'm just gonna go ahead and click on Gaussian Blur, and I'm going to set that to 0.5, and I like 0.5, might be 0.6, and then over here I'm going to add a color correction node. Like, there are so many people whose fucking visual effects YouTube videos are like that. I'm like, holy shit, this is anesthesia. Or they don't explain why they're just doing something. Like, that drives me fucking nuts. Like, I don't really know what this does. I just like to set it at 2. 2 always looks good. 2 what, motherfucker? What is that? You're not learning. I hate that. Somebody said just do it and read the manual. Don't read the fucking manuals. If you ever read the manuals, this is what it says. Like, it'll say, like, you'll go into the Maya thing or whatever, and it'll say the function is the penumbra generator. And you'll look it up, and it'll say, this increases the penumbra. They're all like that. Fuck that. That doesn't help you anything. So the way I generally do it, like, I learned Dorico, the music notation software, in the last couple of days. I finally got Dorico. I bought it the other day. And generally the way I do it is I start until I can't do something that I want to do. And then I just look up that thing. That's how I do it. It's actually the fastest. It's just the fastest way. I'm just like, so I was working in Dorico, and of course I come from Sibelius. And so immediately I'm like, how do I input a rest? I want to import where's the fucking rest? Here's a note. How do I make the rest? Make a rest. Which, as far as I can tell, it doesn't do. It makes the rest later, but that's how I did it. How do you fucking how to make a rest? And there wasn't a direct answer. And somebody was like, you sort of have to make the note value that you want for it to totally be, and then it'll work it out, which really, I was like, that's fucking jacked up. It took me a good day to get my head around thinking that way. But I want to rest right here. It was really kind of fucked up. But anyway, but it was like that too. And then I was like, tie, how do oh shit, I accidentally tied 2 notes. Okay, well, can I delete? No, that's not work. How to delete tie. Hit the U key. Okay, there you go. That's how I learn. I do it project-based, task-based, and then I just look up individually the things that I need as I go. That's just me. It's actually very fast for me. I learn things pretty quickly that way. I always join a live video where the host says, fuck. Well, that's why we waited just for you to come in. But that's, that's just how we all learn different ways. I cannot stand. I've done some Lynda courses, and I just can't stand. They're either way too slow. The information is coming slowly, or they talk too deep into something without giving me any umbrella concepts. A lot of instruction is like that. Most people can't teach worth shit. Am I on Cubase now since you're on Dorico? I haven't. Cubase is, Cubase. But I don't use it, but I have it. I still do everything in Pro Tools. But yeah, I'm hoping that I can get into Dorico. My first 3 days or whatever, a couple of days with Dorico, I got some stuff out. It looks real nice, but it was really clumsy. It was just, for me, I'm still in Sibelius mode, so I'm just like, it's just weird yet, but it's pretty, and it put music on the page, so whatever. Yeah, I was actually, what I did in it was we had done this live transcription of 80s tunes the other day, and we finished it with The Way It Is, that Bruce Hornsby tune, which I had learned years ago, because how could you not have learned it? But I never really learned it, like where I could say, no, that's note for note what Bruce played. Every part of it, note for note. I never did that. It was always like sort of, well, it's kind of like this. So after we did that show, I was like, you know what? I'm going to do that for my first Dorico thing, is I'm going to do a note for note, a photoreal Way It Is. So that was my first Dorico thing, was doing The Way It Is. I guess there are things you don't dive into. I'm beginning Photoshop and I can't do anything without instructions. Well, sure. But don't forget, one of my cardinal rules of learning: try it before you look up anything. Try it. Guess. Just go into a menu and try something that you think is what it's going to do. Always experiment and try on your own, and get that mechanism turned on before you go and learn the thing. There are countless reasons for doing that. It's how you will learn and how you will gain an understanding, and you'll also you'll discover things that you might not have discovered, including processes that may not have, so nobody might be teaching. So no matter what you do, if you want to learn Photoshop, start clicking on tools and trying them yourself. Have a context within which to put the learning. And then you can go to Flern or whatever, assuming you can stand that fucking guy's voice for more than 3 seconds. You can go there and learn some good tips. I have to turn that thing off. I have to mute that shit. I've taken a couple tips from him, and I just have to fucking caption that shit. Twice the speed, caption. Anyway, that's me. Oh, yeah. Yes, good for After Effects. Check Video Copilot. Check out Andrew Kramer stuff. Andrew is a god of After Effects. Truly, a demigod at least. He's done more with that package than it was ever designed to do. Really good at it. For Blender, I'd look at some basic introduction and then just use it and Google things as needed. It really is. Experimentation is really the way to do it. But I'm project-based and goal-based, because otherwise, you don't know. It's like you don't know how much you're learning before you can do anything. It's always the other way. Draco has been learning Modo, and he's been learning Maya and all those things, and it's always a project. You're going to make a very simple ATST. Here's your ATST model. I'll give you this. You can start with a cube, and this bevel will pull all the edges out. And as soon as you cross, how do I make it do? Okay. Well, try some stuff. And then he works on it and he experiments. And when I see that he's sort of in the right ballpark, then I'll nudge him a little bit, like playing, but let him work it out. And he picks it up very, very quickly. Much so if I said, all right, let me explain primitives. There's the cube primitive. There's the cube primitive. There's also the sphere primitive. And we have the cone primitive. You can use primitives and manipulate the primitives. You can use the bevel tool. That's B on the keyboard. Wow. My favorite modeler, polygonal modeler, by the way, is Modo. I really, really like it. And if you like Modo, you go to Peter Stambach's channel, which he hasn't done in years, but they're great Modo tutorials. Peter Stam at 2 M's. Stambach. Polygon, my boy and I, that's one of our little things. Polygon. So anything else about visual? Oh yeah, visual effects, ASMR. You know, I'm serious. That drives me nuts. There's this one guy, because I'm fairly new to RenderMan. I just made it my primary engine. I use RenderMan. I use Bella, which was developed by my friends formerly from Maxwell Render. And if you want something to look totally real and take a million years to render, you use Bella. And I use Octane if it's GPU and I need to get it out really quick. Mike is a better dad than Beto. Hashtag. I don't know. Dylan's actually. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how. Didn't check down Dylan. How's Dylan doing this day? Dylan's working on the cure for cancer. Oh, okay, and he's also built an alternative fuel source. Oh, very good. Oh yeah, there's this guy, and so I'm new to RenderMan. Not new. It's been a couple years now. But there's this one guy, and I can't remember. But he's like from Australia or something, and it's literally the soft-spoken monotones. So we take the light source and we parent it to the locator, and I mean, I just listen, and it's just like, and I'm just like, oh my God, I just want to say, wake up, you're boring the shit out of me, and I want to know what you're telling me. Like to parent it to this node, and I just drag that over, and oh my God, dude, wake up. What kind of screen am I working on? Oh, well, so I do a lot of color critical work. I do a lot of color grading. So my 3 monitor setups are all ISO monitors, EIZO, and they're all, I want to say CG 243s. I bought them a while back. I think that's what it is. 243s, 244s, something like that. I think CG 243. I think it's right in there, and I see it all the time. You don't have to. They're like expensive. You don't have to necessarily do that. There are some decent, monitors. I mean, honestly, when you're just doing visual effects, if it's not super color critical, as long as it supports sRGB, which is primarily where you're going to be working in, you can get, you can get $600 monitors, $800 monitors, even $300 monitors do just fine. It's when you get into really color critical stuff, you need to be able to work in multiple color spaces, or like, P3 color spaces then it's a whole other thing. Yeah, they're only happy little notes. It's like Bob Ross. But somehow Bob Ross always had to, like, there was energy in it. This is like, it's just so, anyway, nice guy, and he'll take you through the stuff. It's just, I was like, oh my God. So yeah. Do I use DaVinci Resolve? I do. I use Resolve. That's been my grader for a long, long time. And that said, I still always will follow a garbage in, garbage out model. So when I shoot things, my girlfriend, you know Miss Love. Miss Love is a cinematographer, and she could rant for hours about a thing that's happened in the world where everybody just sort of shoots it in neutral and then figures they're going to power window the color into everything later, which actually creates a permanent disconnect with the visuals because they do things that the real world can't do with light, and your brain can tell the difference. And so even though you're not quite aware what's wrong, your brain recognizes that if that thing was gold, this couldn't be that color. It would cast, they would reflect, and it makes the images artificial and shallow, and that lessens your emotional and personal connection with the visuals. This happens all day long. We color grade the shit out of things. And so something happened in cinematography where they weren't committing to the lighting on the set. They just do it all later in color correction. It's very different to light people with a blue light than to light them with a light thing and make it blue later. Those are almost opposite looks in terms of the way the light actually behaves with objects in the real world. But one forces you to commit and have a vision, an idea. Following that model, that's the same way I shoot. Look, let's light it as though there was no color correction. I do the same thing in visual effects. I don't go, well, we're just going to change it all in Resolve later. No. Let's say that this was the shot and it was live. Let's get our light values right. Let's get the camera stuff right. Let's get it baked in. And then if we go into color grading, it's not to suddenly reintroduce the drama into the shot. It's a more flexible push, pull, kiss kind of thing rather than, okay, now let's just make all the shadows blue-green and all the skin tones orange. That's ridiculous, homogeneous nonsense and shit. So I don't do that. But when I have to color correct, I love Resolve. Love it, love it, love it. Oh, she's not your wife? I mean, she might as well be. She will be, hopefully, soon. We've talked about it. There's no really reason we haven't. I mean, she's the best. God, so the best. But I haven't officially asked her. That's really all it is. And she hasn't officially said yes. That's really the other part that matters. But we've been together a while. She's fantastic. Miss Love is she my girl. Anything else here? But yeah, but you know, from an artist standpoint, doing a lot of different type of stuff, different disciplines, one affects the other. I learn things in visual effects that directly affect the way I write music, just in terms of connecting with the world. You know, being alert and sensitive and present. Those are great qualities for human beings, and our world is set up such that doesn't encourage that right now. You know, a lot of times people be like, you know, oh, I'm doing a thing where I'm turning my cell phone off this weekend. Oh, you're turning it off this weekend, are you? Yeah, well, that's crazy. I didn't have my phone on for 2 days. You know, well, what if you didn't turn off the phone, but you put it down and looked at the fucking trees when you were walking around? Like, what about that? You know, like that would work even better, and you wouldn't have to turn off your phone. I mean, I don't know, whatever. But like that's one of the things I wanted to instill in my son is, you know, look at the world, now look at it again, now look at it again, now look at it again, and you just realize that it's a way more interesting world than you thought it was. And you only know that because you're really present and in the moment and living at that moment in order to even notice it. That is a very, very cool thing for a human being to do for itself. Martial arts has informed and supports my musicianship. Absolutely can believe that. Draco takes Taekwondo. I absolutely believe that. Do you think math opens up a lot for composing? You know, my ex-wife and I, you know, obviously her being a high-level mathematician, and I have had that discussion because people always told me, oh, you're good at music, you must be good at math. And my answer was, fuck no. Well, it depends. Algebra I had to take like 3 times, and whereas I walked into my geometry class, and remember in the Matrix when they just stick the thing in your head and you instantly know kung fu? That's how geometry was. I walked in and the guy had barely a ray, and I'm like, I get it, I totally get it. Something about geometry. It's like I was pre-wired for geometry. So in that way, you know, that kind of math. But algebra, I just was annoyed by somehow. So, you know, but also there is an underpinning of math in music, which you know as a physicist, that you could define the entire universe in terms of math. As a physicist, you could determine, you know, we could define the entire world as fields. That's what it's all fields. Everything's a field, right? So, I mean, that's one of the beautiful things is that certainly you can be confident that there's a mathematical underpinning and a mathematical definition for virtually everything in one way or the other. But in terms of a direct correlation that you can draw from, I have not found that to be the case in music. In fact, very much like visual effects, it's the imperfections, the things that defy quantization and absolute quantifiability that makes music music and not just something that was spun out by a algorithm. I personally can't draw for shit. Is it necessary for being effective at visual effects to work? That is an animation. So I can't draw either, really. I mean, a little bit. But one of the reasons I was able to get into visual effects is because just like in music, you know how there are composers that can get into music now and they have no musical ability whatsoever? Well, at the dawn of computer-aided visual effects, it wasn't artists who were into it. It was people like me who could use computers. And we had a vision in our head, but we didn't have the artistic ability to do it. And we came in and swooped in and had all kinds of careers. Now, my personal thing was I didn't want to not know what I was doing. So So I learned skills. But initially I was working on huge high-level projects, having never worked in it, and I couldn't draw a fucking stick figure. So I can say that not necessarily drawing itself, that will never hurt you, but knowing all of the other things that go into shot composition. And the more you know, the better, of course. I mean, like I said, when we showed the General Lee, I taught Draco some basic perspective rules and some proportions rules about cars, which I would have learned in drawing school. I just happen to have learned in other ways. But those are the kinds of things that you'd study in art school, especially with regards to, bodies and proportions and that sort of thing. So those are super useful, never hurt you. But depending on the field that you go into, visual effects, again, highly compartmentalized, I cannot say that drawing is a prerequisite. Draco has all the important domains for life going on: physical, emotional, intellect. Have you heard of triune brain theory? That has really opened up my perspective. I haven't. Certainly from my reading no, I haven't heard of that specifically. But, I hadn't heard of Rick Beato's, I don't know how you say it. Beato? Is that his name? Beato? Is that a real name? I wonder what that is. What nationality is Beato? Anyway, I hadn't heard of his neural thing until after I had already raised Draco like that, or had started in his formative years to do it. I didn't do it anywhere near as intense as what he did to Dylan. Dylan's remarkable. But I think if somebody had suggested that level of intensity, I'd been like, my kid's going to blow his brains out or shoot everybody by the time he's 7. I'm not doing that to him. But that's what, anthropologists and sociologists like to call the law of independent discovery, where, on two sides of the world, opposite sides never talk to each other, both figured out about taking steel and heating it and cooling it and heating it, So it would not surprise me that probably what I've done through trial and error and thought and consideration for Draco and for myself, I'm sure there's somebody's come up with, I'm sure I didn't invent it. Somebody else has done it. Probably has a term for it. Beato? Beato. It's Beato? Okay. Beato. It looks like Beato. Rick Beato. Okay. How to start working in a film industry? Well, you start, first you have to have something to say. Well, it depends it depends what you want to do in the film industry. What do you want to do? You want to work craft services and hand out Kit Kats? Or do you want to be a gaffer and hang lights? You want to be a cinematographer? What do you want to do? You got to figure out what you want to do. Beato. It's Rick Beato. Beato. Okay. I know. I guess he got a really big channel or something. I've never actually seen any of his stuff. Well, I saw a neural thing, and I saw Dylan going, "Hey, F sharp G, F flat." Oh, fuck, that kid's a fucking robot. That's crazy. And he was like speaking Chinese and shit. I'm like, all right, that worked. It worked. And then I kind of felt bad. Draco and I were watching it. I'm like, dude, I'm sorry. I didn't know we could go that far with it. I would have made you a fucking supervillain if I'd known. I didn't know. This isn't, Draco's like, that's crazy. I'm like, I know. Anyway. But I don't actually know Rick. People keep asking me, too. I don't know why they keep asking me. I think it's because he has a beard and he has a music channel. Or doesn't he have a beard? I think I saw him with a beard. Or am I making that up? Is that Obi-Wan Kenobi? Somebody else. Somebody has a beard and has a music channel. But I guess he's got a really big channel. I don't know. But I don't just do music. I do a lot of other stuff. Does he do other stuff, too, other than build super brains? I don't know. But I do a lot of different stuff in my life, and that's trying to tie that all into music is part of my umbrella concept, which you guys know, which is that we can't separate. The music isn't a thing we do; it's a part of who we are, and that blending those things together, our life experiences and our philosophies, and all of the other things that we learn and know and think about and consider and work on must be part of our music. And so we have to increase our skills across all these ways so that those things can come out, So a mashup, I don't know. Like I said, I don't know. He makes some film scoring tutorials. That's cool. Cat walks on a piano. Dylan, what's that chord? Yeah, I'm sure. Like I said, he seems like I've only seen a little bit of him. I really don't know anything about him. I know I'm talking out of school. He's a nice guy as far as I can tell. But I don't know anything about him. But if he's teaching people stuff and they're getting better and making better composers, I'll subscribe to his shit. Because more of that. Intelligent people trying to spread what they know and help people get more skills. Like, how can you not? Obviously, I don't develop my YouTube channel. We're not in any kind of competition, you know. It's mostly live transcribing. Oh, love his "What Makes a Song Great" series. Oh, okay, that's a great. Well, it might be. I should check that out sometime. But it's mostly live transcribing. More of the what than the why. Oh, okay. As far as, the measure of a teacher to me is whether or not at the end of the lesson you have more power. Something practical, not that you memorized more stuff, but then you can then take what the teacher has given you and materially and substantially have more skill and control. To me, that's the only measure of a teacher, because it's meaningless when somebody says, he says it in a way that I understand it. That will only be proven when you use it and demonstrate that. We are what we do. So my classes are designed to give you skills that you should immediately go sit on the piano and have another level of control with. And actually, if you don't, then you're just not doing what I'm telling you to do in the class. You're not transcribing, or you're not literally, experimenting in the modulations and moving your hands around the way I've told you to try in a number of things, because they do work and they're designed to, okay, you don't need to listen to me talk. You want to learn to write music better. Do this. And it's not the thing to do, it's the concept to do. You find the path from A to B. I'm just going to tell you, you know what I mean? That's how I do that. So, I don't know his teaching method. I know nothing about him. I know that for myself, that's always my criteria for a teacher. Not did they say it so that a way that I can understand it, because I'm not a moron. The question is, did they teach it to me in a way that I can now immediately have more control and skill, or immediately know the thing that I can do that can measurably improve my skill? Otherwise, what they taught me didn't actually develop understanding. Like if somebody goes, learn these 3 chords, and you do those 3 chords, that does not tell you anything that you need to know about writing music, because the chords don't tell you the why. Why those 3 chords? Why this? Why? The why is always the thing. The what is nothing. The what is the easy part. It's the why. That's what matters. Doing martial arts when younger gave self-awareness, mental and physical wherewithal, all effects positive. Well, you know what? Although I will say that the effects, I live in Los Angeles, and Draco's Taekwondo class, I took martial arts, and when I took martial arts, Hank, my instructor, I took judo, that was mine. Hank, my instructor, usually began teaching me how to break a hold by throwing my ass down on the fucking mat at 900 miles an hour, which also taught me how to fall. But I learned holds and grips and balance because if I wasn't absolutely on point, Hank was going to throw me down on the ground at 900 miles an hour. And he was this Japanese guy with such a happy grin on his face at all times. It was his favorite thing. He almost used to bounce in joy after he would slam one of us to the thing. He just loved it. He wasn't mean. He just loved the sound of it, I think. And but you learned to fucking do the thing because, smiling or not, he was going to put your ass on the fucking mat. So Draco's in Taekwondo, and they got these kids are dressed up in fucking snowsuits. They got so much protective gear on. You could hit them with a baseball bat. And then they do these things. They go to Taekwondo, and they're going to do sparring. And they're like, now don't you just lightly touch the other person. And as a result, my kid can do forms out the ass, and yet you don't learn defense until you've been hit. I mean, if you've ever, I've done boxing quite a bit, and the guy who taught me, Jimmy Nickerson, it's just, my hands are always dropping. And he's like, your hands are always dropping. You got to keep your hands up. I'm like, And Jimmy taught me how to keep my hands up. It didn't take long. And it wasn't by telling me to keep my hands up. And so with Draco, I'm like, like the focus part of it, they don't have to be that focused because the forms aren't that hard to do and the kids aren't that focused. And they don't want to drive the kids hard because they'll all shit their pants and cry, and then the parents won't spend $200 and $300 a month in the car. It's like martial art. It's like a really, really like it's martial arts. It drives me fucking crazy. But he takes a lot of pride in moving up the belts and in learning all that stuff and trying to get his forms right. It's just the martial arts part of it. I would love to see the whole other level of focus that comes, which every man should feel. It's one good clock. You're a different person at the end of a fight. Just forever. I think it's one thing kids should do. And now beat the shit out of him. It's one good one. Is you need that. First time you've ever been slammed in the nose, you are different after that. Beto is roasted by forums because of his attitude and sometimes arrogance. Well, I think any good leader who knows what he's doing. I mean, first of all, as musicians or professional creative content people, we all have some arrogance. If I write a piece of music and if any of us write a piece of music and put it out, we're arrogant enough to assume that the world should stop what it's doing and listen to our stuff. And if we didn't think that, we wouldn't play for anybody. We would just play it for ourselves. So we have a built-in arrogance. This is worth your time. This thing which I have created. We're all Pygmalion to a little bit. But maybe he's good at what he does, and, somebody even said it's not arrogance if you're good. Well, I don't know. Who does better education about music theory? Oh, I don't know. I haven't. But I also largely dismiss theory because as a fantastic tool for discussing music and has absolutely no business whatsoever in the process of creating music. I could defend that till the sun burns out. But my biggest criteria for any teacher is I don't care what you teach, I don't care how you teach it. Are the people on the end of your lesson measurably, quantifiably, and instantly more skilled? Or have the tools to become more skilled? That's the only thing. I don't care how you teach. But to never be in competition with another teacher that way. Some jealous forum people? Yeah, probably. I never liked this guy who hit me hard, but he was right. It's just an important thing. I obviously fundamentally disagree with virtually everything that goes on outside of these walls in regards to raising children. Draco is he's on baseball team, and it's we had to take him up to club baseball. We had to get somewhere where they were playing fucking baseball, and it wasn't just babysitting. And, and it still drives me nuts. Like Draco and his team, they went to this other place, and we drove an hour and 20 minutes to get there, and they called the game in 37 minutes because it was 17-0. That we were the nothing. And the parents are all like, great job. That drives me no, it isn't. You just drove 2 hours, an hour and a half. You just got shut out because they didn't have basic skills. That's not good. That happened to me when I was a baseball player. I was a pitcher, and they took us down to the south side of Chicago to play some black kids from Cabrini Green, and it was the exact same thing, and ain't nobody on that bus ride was going back going, look, you know what? It's important just that you have fun. That's what matters. It was like, dude, the white kids just got their fucking asses handed to us. It was embarrassing and humiliating, and everybody saw it happen. And you know what? We got better after that. And when you take away kids' ability to feel bad for losing, you also take away their pride for winning. You can't have it both ways. I hate that shit. It's so bad. And all you have to teach the kids is just do your best. Because if you've done your best and you know it, you won't like losing, but you'll be okay with it. Yeah, you know what? They beat us. We brought that shit and they beat us. That sucked, but they fucking brought it. That's okay. You can live with that. Anyway. Do I know James Cameron? I've worked on his project or his thing. I was a project manager for one of the attractions at the Avatar theme park, the Pandora World thing at Disney World for a year. So we're working with Lightstorm with Cameron at his thing. I don't know Jim Cameron. It would not be a safe thing to say. Conferences. That's where I got all the footage of the Titanic. Because if you go to Lightstorm down here in El Segundo or whatever it was, all the alien stuff, the alien power loader is there, and the fucking ship, the clear ship from the abyss, and an alien is there, and the Titanic there, a broken Titanic, and then the full hero one is there. And I shot some video. I didn't know it was going to be there. I would have brought a better camera, but I just it was real tall. This shitty video. It's got like 2 million views on my channel. The fucking Titanic walk around. But I do not know Jim Cameron. worked on a project with him. Man, my Sifu was the same. From old school too. Yeah, he was a pioneer in the San Francisco Bay Area. He started full contact scene in the 70s. I mean, it's just, you can always spot the guys who never got in a fight, who never stood up to a bully. You can see them, man. They can be 60 years old. They can be revving that Harley at 2,000 decibels at the fucking light, and you can see them. You always see a guy who's never came to face with their own warrior, their own blood. You got to do that. I was fortunate, informed old school Shaolin training when I was 10 to 18. Wow, yikes, nice. They don't teach like that these days with the plastic playgrounds and lawsuits. No, I know, man, and people aren't better for it. Yeah, getting thrown around, man, it's good. That's a very deep thought, actually shaping you to accept losing in office jobs. Well, yeah, no, it's true. I mean, you take away the pain of losing, you take away the pride in winning. Can't have it both ways. And but again, that's the idea. We talked about this earlier today, the idea that kids can't handle the loss. Well, why not? A couple hundred years ago, kids could handle that half of their relatives were going to die during the winter. Like, what are you talking about? Can't handle it. Well, you can't handle it, or what? Kids can handle it. You're not supposed to like it. It doesn't destroy your psyche. What the fuck? When did that happen? That's honestly, all problems with kids are just kids only know what they're taught and what they're modeled. So it's bad parenting. It's failed parents. That's what's at work. If your kid completely decompensates, if he loses a baseball game, that's not the kid's problem. He's just a child. That's you had no business having children. That's all that is. It's not complicated. But a lot of the parents are just like, the most important thing is having fun. It's not fun to get your ass handed to you 17-0. And you telling the kids that, they don't actually buy it. It's funny because I'm one of those leagues. We were in one of those leagues, not anymore. Where they don't keep score. Well, it's an instructional league. It's really just about instruction. And I'm like, the kids are keeping score. That in the dugout, they're all like, "What's the score? Is it 7-8? Is it 8-7? Who's winning?" That you're just not putting it on the scoreboard. But they're obsessively wondering about the score. That. Well, it's about having fun. Yeah, you know what's fun? Being good at something. You know what's not fun? Not being good and losing because you don't know any skills. That's not fun. What are you talking about? What the fuck? I don't. Yeah, it was like teaching my son to be tough was a really important thing. It's just that he also is taught that emotions are super important things and you can't just stuff them forever. You have to deal with them, but you can decide when you deal with them. You have to have both. As a musician and a fucking, especially my son, he's got really deep emotions and he'll cry. I'm like, that. Now's the good time to cry. There's a time to cry and there's a time not. What are you watching? A sad movie? It's a good time to cry. You miss your mommy and daddy? That's a good time to cry. You just love your doggy so much that you can't express it any other way? That's a fine time to cry. You just took one in the shin. Hold it together, kid. Don't let him see you sweat. Toughen up. Walk it off. You're fine. Keep going. Now's one of the times to be tough. Giving him both sides, getting him super, he takes a lot of pride in being tough. And he takes no shame in being weak. He takes no shame in being emotional when it's because he can decide. Was that so complicated a thing? We couldn't figure that out? It had to be, men don't cry. Bullshit. And it didn't have to be, it's just he's super sensitive. No, he needs to be tough a little bit. He's got to stop crying all the time. Stop fucking crying. It didn't even hurt that much. Can't it just be somewhere in the middle there? Is this really that tough? Apparently this is really tough. Turns out you give a kid both, he's nice, healthy, balanced, and secure. And he doesn't have to hide from his emotions, and nor do they have to govern him. And then someday, some girl's going to be like, I heard a noise. And he'll be like, I have you, sweetheart. And her nipples will pop out. And he'll be happy that dad taught him to be tough. And also, then he's sensitive. So, look, this is just not complicated. It's not complicated. You just have to throw out everything that anybody says today. Just throw it all out. Anything somebody about how to raise a children. Nope. I'm going with the last 20,000 years. I'm going to go with that one instead. Just throw it out. Children really just need to have... No, they don't. Fuck you. You don't know anything. Kids are all depressed, taking drugs. Half the kids are on drugs. The other ones are shooting up schools. You don't know shit. That's my parenting technique. That's why Draco couldn't go to school. He wouldn't be in school 5 minutes. Anyway, but it's like when they say don't judge, but we're all literally wired to judge. Yeah, that's how we get through the entire day. All you do all day is judge people. Like, is that store busy? Look like the line is moving? That person looks safe? Like, this is my person, this is not my person. We're social creatures. That's what we do. We judge all day long. It's not a bad thing. Plus, don't worry about other people. Just make yourself the kind of person that you can be judged all day long. You're square with the house. Be a good person, a compassionate person, an empathetic person, intelligent, logical, reasonable, that you put good shit into the world, that you're going to leave something behind, healthy, productive children, good works of art. You're square with the house. Just judge all day. There's this thing in Western culture where it's taboo for guys to have emotions. Again, it's not really Western culture. It really depends on. That's really all that is weak males. My grandfather, who was Italian, the strongest man I ever knew, just a fucking bruiser, a Navy fucking Italian barrel-chested bruiser, was one of the most, the bear hugs and kisses, the same ones I give my son, just bear hugs and just my boy. That's how he was. That's where I learned, like, don't tell me that dude's not tough. That dude would fucking just punch a car. But he was super emotional. So I saw that modeled very early, that those things were not in conflict. It's weak beta males that are afraid. Weak beta males are afraid of other men challenging them, their girl. Don't talk to my girl, it's my girl. Okay, so obviously she's not your girl, or wouldn't you be afraid of these challenges? Plus you just showed your girl that you're afraid of other men, so evidently you don't own this shit. Maybe you're not bringing it, I don't know, but that's weak. And, men don't cry. Why? Did nothing sad ever happen to you? Well, because once I cry, I won't ever be able to stop. But I don't think it's necessarily Western, because I know a lot of Western people who've worked out this rubric between having emotions and being a fully realized human being and also being fucking tough and a man. It's like not like some huge thing. It's amazing that that's considered like an accomplishment. I don't know that that's Western. I think it's just weak males. That's my take. Well, arguably the last 2,000 years, we're not consistent in upbringing. Well, no, but, that's not our problem, right? It's like, what are you going to do? How are you going to raise your kid? Who are you going to model? Because ultimately your kid is going to be who you are, not what you tell him to be, No. My son sees me, and he watches how I handle my emotions and how I handle my relationships and what my value systems are. And he sees when I'm tough and when I'm weak, and he sees when I am stoic and when I am vulnerable. And he sees all of those things and sees, oh yeah, you can do all that, and it all works. And I don't consider that some sort of amazing accomplishment personally or parentally, but the standards are so low that it is pretty rare. But that's not our problem. We are our problem. Our kids are our problem. So just be that and take care of it. We've made life so complicated, because that's what we do instead of doing anything useful. But we already talked about that. So anyway. But actually all of this goes to how like when it comes to homeschooling, which is really the fun part about homeschooling is the act of being really clear about what you think and what you believe and how you're going to teach it and what you want to teach. And I discovered I really liked teaching. Not enough to do it, but enough to do it. Because I like being forced to think, okay, well, what do you really believe? Like, how would you actually say this in the shortest, simplest, most efficient, and useful way? I like the challenge of that, selfishly, because it makes me clear on what I am. And all of that, of course, is being a parent. What do I want to teach my child? What do I really want to model for them? Well, in order to do that, first you got to take stock of yourself. First, you got to take stock of the person that you are and how you go through the world. And we were supposed to do this. We're always supposed to be working on ourselves and trying to improve ourselves. I mean, right until the day they turn off the lights. That's kind of supposed to be our goal. And when we stop doing that, that's when you start getting old. You've seen that. People get old. That's when they don't want to learn anything new. They don't want to challenge. Don't tell me. I know. Okay, so you're just waiting to die now. You're just waiting to die. And then there's those people who are sprightly 90-year-olds who are like, I'm going to work this out because that's where life really is. So you take stock of yourself. You take stock of your world. You take stock of what you really believe, what your biases are, of your presence. How can you tell a kid don't be on your fucking phone all the time while you're going, you know what, you shouldn't be on your phone all the time. It's not good to be on your phone all the fucking time. You should look around every once. You can't do that. You have to do that. And my job compelled me to do it. And then that taught me something to pass on to my son as a father. And now he, in a world that is otherwise just glowing rectangles, has the opportunity to fucking look around. And what's great is he can look at people for long extended periods because nobody's heads are up. So like he can study people. We go to restaurants together. We don't have our devices out. We watch people and talk about it later. You know, we have little signals. We just watch people because he's learning people. It's part of socializing. And everybody's, apart and together. And you can look at them because they're not looking at you. You can stare at chicks. Boy, if you want to look at chicks' tits, 2020 is the year to look at chicks' tits. They're not even looking at you. They're just here. Huh. Nice sweater. I mean, I think. I don't do that. Ever. Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men. And weak men create hard times. That's what I'm saying. There's probably a good amount of truth in that. I kind of like that, yeah. I like that, I think. I have to think about it. Hard times create strong men. Sometimes. Like, it's like one of those sayings. Like, don't think about it too close. It's good. I like it. Let's just go with it. It's good for a poster. It's true about school. If that's true about school, that's sad. I hope it's better where I live. What's true about school? What's true about school? No, but Draco literally couldn't be in school. They would not. I'd get a phone call in 5 minutes. If for no other reason, then Draco would be done thing and he'd be like, that's bullshit. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, Draco gets, we create competitions for him, little things for him to hit in his schooling, like the equivalent of grades. I don't think we actually give him grades. Oh, actually, no, we have sometimes because he's wanted them. He'd be like, so would that be an A? If I was in school, would that be an A? Well, technically that's an A minus. Damn. I love that. Yeah, well, I mean, I told you didn't check it. You turned it in. I said, is that your best one? You didn't check it. You had 3 misspellings. You forgot 2 capitals. That's, if you want to know, that's what you're getting for it. Oh, that's good for them. The softness of it all? Oh, yeah, no. Schools is like you wouldn't. They don't learn anything. I mean, have you not noticed? They don't know anything. I don't really actually know what they do in school all day. But it doesn't show up anywhere. It doesn't show up in any of their. They can't read. They can't write. They don't read anything. They don't know anything about history or philosophy or any of that stuff. So, but that's what's fun about homeschooling. You can make your own. I love doing debates with Draco. I love it. Logic and reason. I mean, one of the things that he learns are logical fallacies and false debate tactics that most adults use all day long on social media. Straw man arguments and ad hominem attacks and all these. Like he's learning that now. Nah, I can't do that. You got to have an argument. You're a fuckwit isn't an argument. So he. It's really fun. It's really, really fun. And plus, you're building a little. You're building a replacement. You're going to sick him on the world. I don't want the world looking at me like, really? Really? This is what you gave us? We didn't have enough people. You had to put this thing in the world? I just don't want the world to say that about me. But no matter how hard you try, like I can't wait to find out what obvious mistake I made with Draco, because of course he's my first and only child, And, like anything else, I've thought about every last aspect of it. I've thought about it. Okay, are you sure this is the way to do it? Sure this is the way to teach it? Are you sure this is the time for that? Are you sure this is the experience you should have? Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure? I thought about it. This is what I do. And then all right, we're going to do that. But there's no way on your first time you get everything right. Fuck no. I've done something wrong. And I won't know for many, many years. And then someday he'll come to me and be like, Dad, I got to tell you. I want to know what it was. Yeah, you screwed me up pretty good. I did? Something. It's got to be something. He's fortunate to have positive models around, yeah. So he doesn't have to learn this shit in his 20s and unlearn. But then you don't escape the things, though, right? Like, in other words, so Draco, like, I know, like, here's the thing, especially for guys. Draco, the pattern between Draco and I, as two men, hardwired as men, is I set boundaries and Draco challenges them. That's his job, is to challenge them, right? And to start to think about and start to feel his own thing. And one day, Draco will break through that barrier. He'll bust down my things. And one day, as he tries to figure out how he becomes his own person and no longer is just the product of the things that his dad has programmed him with and modeled him for, when he realizes, as I've told him, listen, your job when you leave here is to figure out what you actually thought. Because listen to my shit like this on you all day, you're going to parrot a lot of the stuff that I say. And he does. And I always call him on it. I'm like, don't say that. Those are my words. Don't say that if you don't actually believe that. You can think something else. You can think I'm full of shit, but you have to make an argument for why. But I'm trying to prepare him for it because I know someday, inevitably, he's going to have to go, you know what, Dad? I've heard your shit my whole life. You think you got all the answers. You don't know all the answers. He's going to have some moment. My son and I are going to have some moment where he's got to be like, man, and he's got to have to figure it out on his own, and then eventually he'll come back and be like, I guess you were kind of right about that. I don't know. But he's going to go through that no matter what, because that's just part of it. You break through your own thing and you deny it, and that's coming. No amount of anything else that I could ever do for him is going to avoid that. So much so that I've actually thought about giving him some things to deliberately fight against. Like I've wondered, like maybe I should, like there's something I should be like, don't ever touch the thing in the cabinet, like just something that I don't really think about, but I pretend like, and never, listen to me, never ever touch that so that I can see, like touch it, you know what I mean? Like he's gonna have to break down, no matter how, we're so close, we're super close, and I'm as cool as a dad can be while still being like a dad, but someday it's just gonna be like, Dad, that's coming, man. That's coming. Dad, face it. You're old. I love you, but you're old. You're older. Okay? I mean, it's just how it is. You're an older father. So you don't know. That's coming. How is that not coming? And I'll be like, mm-hmm. And that's going to piss him off even more. Don't act like you knew that. Yeah, somebody said, how old is he? Because as a teenager, he's going to disappoint or rebel at sometimes. That's his function. That's his job. He's 9. Yeah, he's going to. Yes, he is going to. Yeah, and if he's anything like his old man, he's lucky he doesn't end up dead or in jail. Or both, which is really bad. But yeah, that's coming. The eyes wide open on that. I'm not preparing Draco or giving him the things that I'm giving him in anticipation of him not being a teenager and not rebelling and not going through all that stuff. I'm giving him the stuff for the conversations we can have after all that. You have to think long game. I want Draco and I to be tight when he's 30. I'm expecting a lot of not so much in the 18 to 20-someths. You know what I mean? I'm not going to pretend that I've figured out some magical formula whereby an individual never has to actually shake off the programming in order to find his own way, because we all do. You're supposed to. That should be one of the things that your parents say is, okay, so you had to do everything I told you. You had to say everything I told you to say. Now Figure out what you really want. That should be like one of the things that you're told your whole life you're supposed to do when you leave on your own. Okay, now call bullshit on everything that your parents ever said and see if it was right. Try something. Try it. They were just saying what they thought. How do they know? Maybe it was wrong. You got to check it out. If you decide to come back on that. But man, don't just, because then you're not even you. Then you're just whatever your parents told you to be. You know what I mean? You're worshiping the God of your parents' choice. Maybe you're not really religious. Got to do that. Don't have to, clearly. Most people don't. But how are you alive if you're not doing that? Like, what are we doing? But a lot of that too is just your philosophy and the way that you live your life, and in a lot of ways, and for a lot of reasons that I've talked about, from very early, I just sort of like, I don't know about any of this. How life is and how people were. So I was sort of just inclined to, I was never part of a group. I was never in the group. Never. The groups are cornfields to me. It's just like, I just feel like I'm disappearing inside the group. I was never a person who was different to be different, because that's contrived and not real. That's a person who desperately wants to be part of the group. I just was never part of the group. A lot of skeptical about the way things are. That's just how I was. So he's getting a good measure of that, and that'll come back to bite me in the ass sooner or later, because it already does. When Draco makes some very sophisticated arguments, because I've trained him to, which just means now that I'll say to do something, and Draco's like, Now, I would just like to ask you, because the last time you did it, you said this, and your reason was this, which seems like it's less of a good reason than this. So why would it be this time? And as a parent, you're just going to be like, because I said so. No, like, that's a good point. That's an excellent point. Excellent point. Now, let me tell you why. Because I said so. Now, get in there and brush your teeth. My dad was slightly bumped by some tool advice, which wasn't how you are supposed to use the tool. My dad trust was slightly bumped by some tool advice, which wasn't how you were supposed to use the tool. Come on, Mike. This is not that complicated. My dad's trust was slightly bumped. My dad's trust was slightly bumped. Maybe he means fool, by some fool advice. No, it's tool. Ah, shit, you're going to have to re-say that. But yeah, I mean, but yeah, Draco's my big experiment. That you only have one chance to get right, and there is no right. You just do your best, but trying to do your best actively, like, just, I don't know, that's not good enough. Not with your kid, not to me. So yeah, you're right. I work on every part of it. I think about every last part of it, because it's like, because the consequences will be paid by him, not by me. I don't care what people think of my parenting. I care about the health and welfare of my son. I care about his emotional and psychological, security, and the fortitude and strength of his emotions, and the widest possible skill set, and the way he's connected to the world. And that's my concern, because that's for him. That's what he's going to go out into the world with. I'll be dead. I'm not in a parenting contest. I'm just trying to make sure that my son has everything he needs. And since the world is all crazy and different, it's like, I want to give him as much as I possibly can so that he's got a tool for any problem. You know what I mean? Like, this is real practical stuff. But that just does require you to really think about it, like really think about it. And, I certainly don't take my clues from my parents. My parents did not have it wired. They were way too young. It was not a good scene with my parents growing up. They didn't mean to not know what the fuck they were doing, but they did not know, ultimately. But that actually ended up working out, because then I was like, well, I'm not going to do that, whatever. But you can't do anything well without really looking at it, unless you just do what you're told, and then you don't really know what you're doing. So my trust in my dad was slightly bumped by some tool advice. Still don't quite get it. Hi, welcome, good morning. Yes, I was doing a late night thing. We're at like 2 in the morning or something here, and I did this just for you guys across the pond or whatever you normally get shafted out. And if you go back and you watch the stream was, this stream was started about talking about visual effects, which was actually a discussion about being extra observant and appreciative and enjoying the world around us, specifically in respect to the amazing visuals that we have, but also just appreciating how beautiful and complicated the real world is that we take for granted all the time, which is a thing that we benefit from. I think he means he lost some trust because the use of a tool was incorrect. I don't know. You should explain it. My dad gave the wrong instructions to use a sharpener. Oh, and something happened? You're really not just saying, I'm sorry how unclear that was. Yes, okay. You trust your dad, told you how to use a sharpener. Like, okay, so you got hurt? I read a Robert Bly's Iron John. A lot of Mike says is essentially about being a man. It's a story about teaching a young man child how to be a man. Well, yeah, I mean, which again too, that's I mostly the idea of a man. There's so many times that becomes synonymous with asshole. But I've been a domestic violence counselor for 20 years now. It's actually 20 years in July of this year, working with men batterers in and out of the prison system, and I train victim advocates. Those are the women who go out on domestic violence calls. I teach them about the dynamics of men batterers, and I talk to the city of Los Angeles about domestic violence policy and that sort of thing. And so as a co-facilitator in a men's group, it's all about the dynamics of men battering, which is inexorably tied to being a man. That's really what it's about. It has nothing to do with women or disrespect or hatred for women. It's zero. That is not in any way connected to domestic violence. That's virtually unknown, which is why we've made no meaningful progress in domestic violence. But what I learned and have been talking about for 20 years is that really it's an issue about things that go on within socialization of men. And it's a man issue. And I should do a video on that. Well, actually, next time I speak, I think we're going to film it and it'll go on YouTube, because I talk to these women groups, and it's a really fun and interesting process for them. But the dynamics of men and the definitions of men and what makes a man and doesn't make a man are a fucking total disaster across the board. And young boys and then men ultimately suffer for it in innumerable ways. And saving Draco from all that was also one of my major agendas. And he's come with me several times as I've talked to these groups and heard us talking about the dynamics of men and ultimately what leads to the power and control based violent stuff. It's an interesting, it's a whole thing. Build your boat the best you can, then let the sea take it. Right, this is sort of fatalistic, but also learn to sail, right? Not hurt, but I just believe that he was always right, especially as a technical person, but he happened to be wrong there. Well, that's, which is, I think, an important thing. I mean, if he took ownership of it, because I think that's the other thing, too, is, my boys will tend to idolize their fathers. They just tend to. And it's always important for me to show my mortality and my failures and stuff to Draco, so he knows I don't have all the fucking answers, and I can be wrong and I can be this and that, and taking responsibility for my failings and mistakes is really, really important. That's part of it. So I think it's an important role as a father, to recognize that your son is going to be probably trying to be just like you. Sometimes in a really obvious way. Drake always wants to wear the same clothes I'm wearing. He's like, look, we match. Like, it's just the little things like that. And he likes to use my expressions and all that stuff. And, he's like, Dad, how do you know how to do all this stuff? How do you do all that? So, okay, that's a goal. That's in there. So it's important for me to let him know, yeah, this one I just screwed the pooch on that. Yeah, I had no idea what I did there. I don't know. He hears me say that all the time. Dude, I don't know. I have no clue. Let's Google it. I don't know. It's just important, I think, so that there isn't like that. Like, there isn't that thing. Have I read David Data stuff? I have not. I think we're on the same page with the masculine persona. Well, more so than being a masculine persona per se, the dynamics of certainly the way that well, I don't want to get into it. It's the whole thing. Yeah, look at this new failure I wrote. Well, Draco does hear me say that all the time. And he knows that it's not damning, that I'm not being disingenuous about it. He hears me write it and go through a thing and know that I mean it when I'm like, well, that was waste. That's crap. This went nowhere. I thought it was going to go somewhere, went nowhere. And he sees I don't make a big deal out of it. That doesn't ruin my day. But it also just means that, yeah, no, this is life. It's mostly a lot of trial and error and plenty of error. But, you learn it and you practice it. And so, as he learns piano, he gets really frustrated because it takes him so long and he wants to go right to full speed as fast as possible and he can't and he gets frustrated. And so I was working on something the other day and he was just sitting there playing Call of Duty for a while and I was working on it. And at some point he's like, Dad, you just keep playing that. I'm like, it's right. It's not right. I'm practicing. I told you, I can't just always do it. This is hard stuff. It takes me a while. I've been doing this for 40 years. And yeah, dude, it always looks like this. Practice. Yeah, 10,000 times maybe I'll be able to do it. So don't worry. Don't feel bad that it takes you 10. It's just important. Do you think the future of 3D is for generalists or specialists? Oh, well, I think be a generalist because that's more skill, more control, and more perspective with which you can contribute. You have more practical abilities to work, and you can communicate more meaningful with the people that you will inevitably be teamed up with, and that dynamic is good. It's just very different to prepare a scene knowing what's going to happen to it down the pipeline, and then to have conversations with your fellow creative collaborators and to even show respect for their discipline ingratiates you to them and bonds you together and ultimately makes for a better product. But there's no discipline, not anything, where I think my advice would be, no, just be compartmentalized and just work on that little part that you're going to do. I just can't imagine anywhere that's good advice. Yeah, I can't think of. I think in general, no matter what the discipline is, when I was taking photography in summer camp when I was 8 or whatever, like an integral part of that was the part where you're developing the film in the fucking darkroom. That changes the way you shoot. And even though for so many people you're not gonna have a dark room and somebody else will maybe develop it. Yeah, but doing that, having an understanding of that, is just part of it. I think in 3D or CG or any kind of work that you do, you should be able to do all the skills involved. Because your work is going to go down the pipeline and other people are going to do things to it, and to be able to speak their language and or try to compensate for things that people might do. Those things are all really useful. As a composer, I write cues knowing exactly what the re-recording mixer is going to do down the line. And I often set up things that stop them from reaching the fader when they normally would do it. And then my music ends up more prominent in the mix where it belongs. I wouldn't know that if I wasn't a re-recording mixer and hadn't spent a lot of time on mixing stages. I know exactly what happens on mixing stages. I've been a sound designer and re-recording mixer, and I've watched what happens to the music over the course of a 3-day mix, where it starts loud, and by the time it's done, you hardly hear it. Everybody's flying around and stuff, all this. Yeah. So, an awareness of that discipline, which technically, a composer wouldn't necessarily have to learn that, but that changes the way I write and prepare and orchestrate the music. So a lot of my orchestrations have mix built into them by their nature. And it stops a lot of people from grabbing faders. So knowledge is power. Although I think you should use your talent in a niche, because when you're the best in something, it gets you jobs. Yeah, but if you're the best at everything that you do, why don't try that? That's a good thing, because that also works, Just try to be the best at all of them. That's a good goal. And then you have really opportunities. But if there's one particular thing that you're good for, yeah, why would you not do that? But you'll probably also then get pigeonholed, and that'll be the thing that you can do. It just depends. I try to, at least for myself, I try to do everything at the highest level possible, because it'll be the thing that I don't do well is the thing I'll be asked to do, and then I won't get to do it anymore because I wasn't that good at it. So I try to either not do it or do it really well. I don't like people know about stuff I don't do really well. You know what I mean? I don't care how long it takes. I don't want that to be out there because it'll backfire. I always wonder, what if we make a CG character to mimic maybe a photorealistic puppet on a set, not an unconstrained, can do anything creature? Well, that we talked about this earlier about people's inherent. Like one of the things that's really different about movies now, that is part of what makes them so disconnected and not lasting or cherished, is the boundless camera, which people can tell. People can tell that this is not a camera. A camera cannot do what you just did. It flies up into space and comes down and goes in through a camera can't do that. There's no rig in the universe that can do that. And on one aspect of it is like, well, that's really cool. It's also really not real. And the rest of it is supposed to be real. And you create a permanent disconnect. And you just hope that it's so cool that people won't care that it's not in any way real. And that doesn't usually work. It doesn't. It's amazing what grounded stuff does because people have an inherent sense for that. That's one thing I've always been very, very strict of in my own CG camera work is you could do it. You could really do it. It would, might not be easy. You might have to have a guy on Steadicam who was on a crane platform and then had to step off the platform. But if you could do it, I'll do it. But otherwise, like I remember I was doing this, I was doing this stuff for this movie, and there was a lot of stuff out in the sky, and I had to make sure, like, okay, this is to be shot with a helicopter, and the helicopter can't go at Mach 5. So, good question here. Well, why does the crazy camera work then in the Matrix? So, it's interesting that you say, why does it work? What do you mean work? You mean being interesting and entertaining? That's not the problem. Interesting and entertaining, it works. And nobody had ever seen that effect before. It's gone now because it finally ended up in TGI Fridays commercials. But at the time, that was an entirely new thing. That was a really cool thing to say. But it also was the thing. It wasn't in service of the image. It was the thing. Like, what the fuck? And the material around it was also very simple. Guy gets shot by a bullet. But what if you could slow down the fucking bullet and go around it? That's really cool. I'd never seen that before. Visually interesting stuff has merit. It's just not a substitute for a story. Also, dramatically, you can make an argument for that. The Matrix isn't real. Ultimately, what happened in those moments represented something that the character of Neo was ultimately going to be able to do. Reframe his experience in this unreal world the way he wanted to. So there's actually a dramatic motivation for that. And the environment very specifically wasn't real. Plus, it was new. You put those things together, you work out balance, you can get away with that in the Matrix. But it had no business in the TGI Fridays commercial going around the plate of buffalo wings, which is why it then became a parody, and that effect has all but disappeared. What the fuck? Are we getting spammed by some sort of thing? Hey, Mike, kind of off the topic, but what's your take on Tom Waits? I recently transcribed some of his tunes, and there's some great stuff in there. Some good stuff, yeah, I would say. Some good stuff. I mean, my take on it? I mean, like, it's as ripe for transcription as anything else. Like, if you like a tune, go do it. Like, go do it and transcribe it. Like, yeah, man. Hang on, can I do something here? Isn't there like a thing I can do, like fuck off? Isn't there a thing like remove? It doesn't get rid of all their things. Like I can do a thing like that, right? Hide the user on this channel, like make them go away. Anyway, yeah, he's gone. Bots. Anyway, hopefully you won't see him anymore. I did something about it. I don't know if I did the right thing. I was looking for the button that blew up the computer and all the people who programmed the bot, but that wasn't one of the options. Anyway, so yeah, so regardless, somebody had posted, have fun at work. Somebody had posted, it's like I saw in some of the comments, there were some other things that people were asking about being transcribed, or were asking to transcribe. And I went and checked out at least one of them. There's this crazy Go West tune. And, and I'm happy to report that the process for transcribing any of the other tunes that we didn't transcribe is exactly the same as the ones that we did. It's exactly the same. Somebody even posted this Yoko Kano piece, this ballad piece, which I went and listened to, and it was like a lot of, it was like my modulations class in a nutshell, and a lot of circle of fifths stuff. Like it was actually really, really simple, but it can sound complicated. But I listened to it at the time. I was like, you know what? If you just slowed this down and went bottom line, you could work this out. This is not super complicated. It was not complicated. It felt complicated. It started with some chord like this that went to then. Like it was like a thing. So it sort of had this, seemed like, oh wow, we're already doing stuff. It was some sort of something. I don't know, some little thing. But it was actually really simple underneath it. It's all usually really simple. And it's this is one of the things we talk about in the composition classes. It's not usually complicated. You can make something very complicated or sounding complicated out of simple pieces. But but that's not where the complex is not where. It's not like more complex, better. That's not a thing. That's not a thing. Anyway, so spontaneous little what do you call these, live broadcast, live stream on visual effects and other things, but just to recap, because suddenly realizing it's like almost 3. I gotta go pick up Draco in 7 hours. That the thing that we learned from visual effects is to really, really be present and take in the myriad complexities of the world around us, the visual world around us. And it's a fantastic thing to recruit and bring into your life. And if you go back and you watch the first part of the videos, you get just a brief glimpse of the various properties and qualities and materials that are around you all the time, which you can learn in 5 minutes. And as you go out, you will see the world differently. Right now, you'll walk out and you'll be like, that's metal. That's plastic. That's this, that's that. You'll see things that are different. And in that moment, you're more connected to the world. Connected. And everything else in our world is disconnecting and pushes it. It's on a screen, or it's fed to us, and we don't really have ownership of it, and we're not really in control of it. But not taking the stuff in this amazing world for granted, is a skill set we have to learn in visual effects. But it's a skill set that every single human can really change the quality of their life by adapting the process of, and it takes nothing. It takes nothing, just a little. but by teaching you a few things about visual effects, then you have something specifically to look at. Because otherwise, the general statement of like, just be more present, like, okay, you know, just really try to look at the world. You know, like, have you really looked at the world? Like, that's not really going to help you. Yeah, I've looked at the world. You know, that's not really, you're not really going to do anything with that. That's why I wanted to give you a few specific things to look for, the big ones, because then you can immediately see them and be like, I didn't really notice that. And then you get that sort of matrixy feeling, like, you're like, you know what? I don't notice most stuff. That's right. Now we're cooking with gas. How many other things do we not notice? Let's get these brains going. Let's snap out of that semi-conscious state that we're in and get back to the conscious, present, world-building state that we ultimately should be in, because we got work to do, right? Life to live. All right. Well, listen, guys and girls, thanks for participating. You know, try to do another one in this time block coming up here. More really, you know, I know a lot of you music time. We'll try to do something music-based, something. I have to go watch and see what the view count was on. Let's go what the view count was on the transcription stuff. Okay, I'm not building my channel, but I do watch what people click on. Like if I'm doing a series and nobody's clicking on it, I'm not going to do that. What am I, for me? No, fuck that. This is for you. So I haven't checked on that, but if people like the transcription stuff, then maybe we'll do more transcription, and I don't know. But that's it. Anyway, the rest of you guys have a good day, and we will see you, you know, tomorrow or the next day, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, all that stuff. All right, thanks, everybody. Have a good night, day, afternoon, week, month.